Chapter 225. Look at this behemoth in front of you. A trace of indifference flashed in Chen Daoxuan's eyes. I see. A beam of light went straight to the catfish world monster, and suddenly, the catfish world monster who was still in Qinyang River during the day was showing great power, and the whole body of the catfish world monster who wanted to slaughter froze. Immediately, a little star pierced the undercurrent at the bottom of the river. The star ray followed the head of the catfish world demon and cut it in two. Spike! With the breath-holding technique and the soul-fixing light, Chen Daoxian directly killed a world monster equivalent to the human race's foundation building stage. To know. According to Luo Ziyuan's description, the strength of the same-level demons is completely inferior to the elite monks of the human race in the Shouxian world. However, Chen Daoxian easily killed him. It can be seen that Chen Daoxuan's current strength has far exceeded that of the elite monks of the same level. This is still the strength of his kendo realm that has not completely entered the third level of sword intent. Once he enters the third level of sword intent, his strength will also usher in an increase. However, even with Chen Daoxuan's comprehension, it is somewhat difficult to enter the third level of sword intent at the foundation establishment. Kill the monster with one blow. Chen Daoxian didn't dare to delay, his consciousness swept away, and he soon found a fist-sized bead in the abdominal cavity of the catfish demon. Look carefully. Inside this bead, there is actually a side of the cave world. But soon, the cave world inside the beads collapsed and turned into a gray one. Before he could think about it, Chen Daoxian put the Jia Yuanzhu after the collapse of the cave into his high-end storage bag, took out a cyan spiritual flag, and waved it casually. Brush! After a wave of space fluctuations, Chen Daoxuan's figure instantly disappeared in place. Less than a cup of tea. A figure wearing a black robe appeared above the Qinyang River. The black figure stood in the air, his eyes seemed to penetrate the bottom of the Qinyang River, and he saw the corpse of the catfish world monster lying on the riverbed and divided into two. He frowned and said, "Is there another body repair that breaks the realm derived from flesh and blood?" Next second, the black figure disappeared in place. The other side. Chen Daoxian attacked and killed the catfish demon, and brought the blood crystals and Jiyuan beads that he obtained, and came to the entrance tens of thousands of miles away in an instant. Quickly flew into the cave covered by the formation. Chen Daoxian stepped into the otherworld passage and returned to Wangxinghai. Southwest waters of Wangxinghai. The otherworld passage in the depths of the Demon Mountain Mountains. This place has long been listed as the top secret within the clan by the mercenary. Except for Luo Shuyuan, Luo Li and other senior mercenaries, the ordinary people of the Merman do not know the existence of this channel at all. In the dark passage, a white figure stepped out instantly, who was not Chen Daoxian. Seeing Chen Daoxian, Luo Li, who was originally worried, suddenly showed a look of joy, and hurried forward to support Chen Daoxuan's dizzy figure after crossing the border. Are you okay? After a few breaths, Chen Daoxian stood firm, looked at Luo Li who was supporting him with a worried expression, shook his head and said, "I'm fine." "You'll be fine." Realizing that it was inappropriate to pull in public, Luo Li calmly loosened Chen Daoxuan's clothes. Chen Daoxuan's mind was completely off Luo Li at the moment. He looked at Luo Shuyuan with a serious face, and said, "Patriarch Luo, immediately block the news of the true demon realm passage, and list this place as a forbidden place. No one is allowed to approach without my order." "Yes, my lord." Luo Shuyuan responded immediately. In fact, he strictly blocked the news as early as the beginning of the discovery of the real Demon World channel. It's just not listed here as a forbidden place. It is now listed as a forbidden place, but it only raises the level of secrecy by another level. Luo Li on the side saw Chen Daoxuan's serious expression, and asked curiously, "What did you find on the opposite side, herd?" Chen Daoxian frowned and said, "The situation on the other side is a bit complicated, and I don't know much about it now, but I have gained a little in the real demon world." "Say it." In front of Luo Shuyuan and Luo Li, he took out the blood crystal and Jia Yuanzhu. "Jiyuanzu. Who knows that Luo Xiuyuan saw the gray bead in Chen Daoxuan's hand and immediately recognized it. Oh? Patriarch Luo also knows this thing? Slightly heard. Luo Xiuyuan nodded. It is rumored that the big clan's sect will use this thing to open up the heavenly paradise. Lord, let's see, the gray part of this bead is the chaotic energy formed after the world collapsed in the demon's body. Injecting this chaotic energy into the blessed land of the cave can expand the space of the blessed land of the cave. Hear this. Chen Daoxian couldn't help thinking of the innumerable cave worlds of Qianyuan Jianzong, and he said in his heart, is the chi of chaos only used to open up caves? This subordinates are not clear. Luo Xiuyuan shook his head slightly embarrassed. No problem. Chen Daoxian nodded, and immediately put the Jia Yuanzhu into the storage bag. He just heard the chaos chi just now, and he felt something in his heart. Well known. When heaven and earth were not divided, it was called the Hongmeng period, and its state was a mass of chaos. It seems. It is reasonable to say that the world demon's internal world collapsed and returned to chaos. Chaos. Hongmeng. Could this chaotic energy be related to using the golden scriptures in the Sea of Knowledge? Chen Daoxian looked at the imposing golden scriptures in the Sea of Knowledge and thought to himself. Lord. Seeing that Chen Daoxian was in deep thought, Luo Xiuyuan on the side made a test. Fine. Chen Daoxian raised his head. Patriarch Luo, look at this thing again. With that said, Chen Daoxian handed over the blood crystal in his hand. Luo Xiuyuan took the blood crystal handed over by Chen Daoxian, and after careful observation, he shook his head and said, Your Majesty, this subordinate has never seen this thing, but I seem to feel it coming from my body. Instinct desire. Come to think of it, this should be some kind of body-refining treasure. Heard. Chen Daoxian nodded. He feels the same as Luo Xiuyuan, and instinctively desires it. Of course, it is impossible for Chen Daoxian to take it rashly without knowing what this blood crystal is. Chen Daoxian, are you going back? Not going back for now. Chen Daoxian turned to look at Luo Li, shook his head, and said solemnly, the real demon world has a lot to do with it. Before I thoroughly investigate it, I will retreat here. Speaking of which. Chen Daoxian laughed. Fortunately, there is a spiritual eye here, but you mere people won't think that I use your spiritual veins? Hearing Chen Daoxuan's joking words, Luo Xiuyuan smiled and said, Of course I don't mind, my little girl, and I wish you lived here forever. Who knows that Luo Li blushed when she heard this, and said, Father, who wants him to live here all the time? Say it. The figure flashed and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Seeing Luo Li's shy appearance, Chen Daoxian couldn't help feeling a little embarrassed. By the way, Patriarch Luo, I believe that Fairy Luo's cultivation base has been promoted to the foundation of completion, and I don't know when I plan to open up the Purple Mansion. Talking about his beloved daughter's cultivation, the smile on Luo Xiuyuan's face slowly faded, his brows furrowed and said, It is no trivial matter to break through the Purple Mansion from the foundation establishment. The little girl has only been practicing for 50 years, so let's take a break and polish it a little more. It's not too late to break through again. Sanding? Chen Daoxian frowned as he looked in the direction where Luo Li left. Logically speaking, after a cultivator's cultivation has reached consummation, there is no need for polishing. The so-called continued polishing is just a waste of time. The only possibility is that the mere people lack the resources to break through the Zifu. Just like the monks build the foundation, the monks break through to the Purple Mansion, and the resources they need are more cherished. Not to mention the most precious one among the elixir that helped to open up the Purple Mansion. The other lesser treasures that helped to open up the Purple Mansion, the mere people were unable to come up with them. Zifu Dan is different from Zhuji Dan. Even the big family in Sangzhou is extremely difficult to obtain. Every time a Zifudan appeared in Sangzhou, it was bound to be scrambled by many big families. If it is said that the foundation establishment pill can be easily purchased with only tens of thousands to less than 100,000 spirit stones, even if the Zifu pill costs millions of spirit stones, it may not be able to buy it. In fact, the more the monks cultivated to the later stage, the more expensive the spiritual stones needed to purchase resources. Some even cherish rare high-level treasures, and can only use barter instead of accepting spiritual stone transactions. Because for those Jindan Jinren and Yuanying Jinjuan, high-level treasures are too rare, and no matter how many spirit stones there are, other than increasing the number of spiritual veins of the faction and enhancing the background of the faction, it is of no use to them. As a result, these high-level monks are naturally reluctant to trade with spirit stones. Guess the embarrassment of the mere people. Chen Daoxian no longer asked. After all, he didn't have Zifu pill in his hand for the time being, and if he kept asking questions, it would be useless except to add embarrassment. After half a cup of tea, watch Luo Xiu go away. Chen Daoxian began to open up a cave in the spiritual eye not far from the real demon world passage. Although he did not open up caves many times, but with the help of his powerful consciousness and cultivation. Just a stick of incense time. A simple cave house was completed by him. In the cave, there are everything in the main hall, bedroom, and practice room for practicing and retreating. Although rudimentary, it is enough for him to use. What's more, the practice room opened up by Chen Daoxian is still in the open air. That is to say, as long as he looks up, he can see the bright starry sky of Wanxinghai, especially the 7 stars shining like the rising sun in the starry sky. The reason why Chen Daoxian paid so much attention to the Xinghai layer of Wanxinghai. Naturally, it was because he saw the formation of Wanxinghai from the remaining memory fragments of the immortal. Therefore, he had a slight expectation in his heart for this mysterious and unpredictable star sea layer. Perhaps, after seeing the scene in the memory fragment, anyone will have expectations for this star sea layer. Only the Xinghai layer of Wanxinghai is here. In the entire Wanxinghai, and even the entire Xiuxian world, any foundation-building cultivator who knows the art of water escape can come here to find out. In other words, it is open to almost all monks above the foundation period. As for whether these monks can gain something from it, it depends on personal luck and understanding. Chen Daoxian can't guarantee this thing. After all, he has never encountered any chance except for the golden scriptures in the sea. Almost all the gains were earned by himself. Only Wanxinghai could be regarded as the first chance he had ever encountered. And it's a great opportunity. However, although this opportunity is great, it is obviously not so easy to succeed. Otherwise, the Xinghai layer of Wanxinghai has been standing in the underwater world for countless years, and no one will have this opportunity. Wrong. Chen Daoxian suddenly reacted. Perhaps, it's not that no one has ever obtained this kind of opportunity, but that those who have obtained this kind of opportunity keep a close eye on it and leave no words at all, so that future generations do not understand. Or maybe Chen Daoxian's level is too low, and this kind of secret is only circulated in the circle of high-level monks, and he doesn't know it. Either way. Anyway, even if some people know about this kind of opportunity, there are definitely not many. In the practice room, Chen Daoxian sat cross-legged on the Wenyu futon. He raised his head and looked at the star sea layer above his head. Next moment, he smashed together 30 stardust in the sea of knowledge and fused them into one. Immediately after, a familiar epiphany struck. Under the epiphany, he stared at the brightest, rising sun above his head, and countless insights came to his mind. Vaguely, he seemed to be able to see a palace above the rising sun. Chen Daoxian's consciousness was constantly rising, and he was getting closer and closer to the palace on the rising sun. But still, he couldn't fly to this palace. In other words, it's not that Chen Daoxian can't fly to the palace on the rising sun, but that he hasn't waited for him to fly to the palace. Epiphany time is over. After a stick of incense, Chen Daoxian, who had finished his epiphany, sat blankly on the Wenyu futon. This is the end? He murmured, I've stored my comprehension for a month, just use it to fly. Chen Daoxian couldn't help but feel a sense of absurdity in his heart. He once again felt the suffocation of the lack of time for epiphany. And unlike before, this time he wanted to fly to the palace in the rising sun in a state of epiphany. And this ascension is obviously unstoppable. Otherwise, the next time you come back, you will definitely have to fly again. But he only had a stick of incense for his epiphany. Even if Chen Daoxian flew many times, he would not be able to fly to the palace in the rising sun. Unless he took out the Jiyuan orb from the storage bag again. One is the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra, and the other is the Qi of Chaos. Are the two of you related? A faint expectation flashed in Chen Daoxuan's heart. No matter how small the world inside the world demon is, after the world is shattered, it will essentially return to chaos. That is to say, the chaotic energy in this Jiyuan orb is, in theory, not much different from the chaotic energy that is not time-sharing between heaven and earth. The only difference is the chaotic aura of the timeless heaven and earth, both in quality and quantity, far exceeds the chaotic energy in the Jia Yuanzhu. After all, it was the existence that opened up the world. I know the golden scriptures in the sea, do I need the Qi of Chaos? All along, Chen Daoxian has not given up exploring the golden scriptures in the sea of knowledge. But this golden scripture seems to be immune to all things visible and invisible. Whether it is Chen Daoxuan's divine consciousness, true essence, or even the stardust of comprehension he has stored, it cannot affect the golden scriptures in the slightest. The state of the golden scriptures in the sea of consciousness has hardly changed since Chen Daoxian first discovered it. The only one change. It still devoured the soul-defying divine light released by Xinjue Zhenren and saved Chen Daoxuan's life. Afterwards, he directly analyzed the complete magical power of soul-ding divine light. That is to say, the golden scriptures have the function of analyzing exercises or supernatural powers. However, Chen Daoxian did not dare to try this function after he tried it for a while. Because the low-level magic golden scriptures simply ignore it. As for high-level spells, he is afraid of death. Chapter 226. Wangxinghai Underwater World. Demon Mountain. Chen Daoxian withdrew from the epiphany state, frowning. Think for a moment. He took out the grey Jia Yuanzhu from the storage bag again. The Qi of Chaos, whether it's useful or not, it's up to you. With a fluke in his heart, Chen Daoxian used his true yuan to break the Jia Yuanzhu. Immediately, a wisp of grey aura emerged from the Jiyuanzhu. At the moment when the Qi of Chaos appeared, the golden scriptures in Chen Daoxuan's consciousness sea really changed a little. The center of the sea of knowledge. The golden scriptures trembled slightly, as if they were not satisfied with the quality of the Chaos Qi, but they still slowly absorbed the grey aura with reluctance. Sure enough, an ecstasy surged in Chen Daoxuan's heart. In the sea of knowledge, the chaotic energy was absorbed by the golden scriptures the moment it came into contact with the golden scriptures. Soon, the chaos Qi in the Jiyuan pearl was completely absorbed by the golden scriptures. Chen Daoxian had a hunch that the change was not over yet. Sure enough, in the next second, a large amount of stardust appeared on the golden scriptures, and then these stardust floated to Chen Daoxuan's sea of consciousness space, revolving around the golden scriptures. 1, 2. Chen Daoxian counted it carefully, and the golden scriptures fed back a total of 763 stardusts, which was equivalent to the comprehension Chen Daoxian had stored for more than 2 years. This. Looking at the dazzling and flying stardust in the sea of consciousness, Chen Daoxian was overwhelmed by a huge sense of happiness. All the time. If Chen Daoxian wanted to obtain the stardust of understanding, he could only recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic every day, accumulating over time. Now, he finally found a way to get a lot of stardust, how to keep him from getting excited. 763 stardusts were enough for him to have an epiphany for more than 6 hours. On weekdays. Although Chen Daoxian can have an epiphany every 30 days, the time for each epiphany is too short, only a stick of incense time, which cannot satisfy Chen Daoxuan's increasingly advanced kendo realm and refining level. Now, he finally found a way to quickly accumulate stardust. Kill the monsters. At this moment, in Chen Daoxuan's eyes, the cruel world monsters became baby bumps. Compared with the monsters that can only kill meat, the Jia Yuanzhu of the world monster has a much greater effect on Chen Daoxian. It's really a treasure. Chen Daoxian looked at the location of the true demon realm passage and said with joy. Resisting the urge to return to the real demon world to slaughter again, Chen Daoxian raised his head again and looked at the starry sky above his head. Next second, 30 stardust in the sea of knowledge merged into one. The familiar sense of epiphany struck again, and with the sudden improvement of comprehension, Chen Daoxuan's consciousness once again soared towards the rising sun above his head. Same as last time. As he flew close to the rising sun, the epiphany time came. Chen Daoxian did not dare to delay, and 30 stardust merged into one. Next moment, the epiphany state continues again. The familiar sense of soaring continued. Very good. Chen Daoxian, who was sitting cross-legged on the Wenyu futon, showed a smile at the corner of his mouth. A total of 4 times the stardust was fused, and the epiphany state lasted for an hour. Chen Daoxian finally realized that he flew above the rising sun and saw the palace on the rising sun. Standing in front of the palace on the rising sun, Chen Daoxian looked at the scene in front of him and was at a loss. A white-robed Taoist appeared in front of him. The Taoist man in white looked indifferent, and said in a cold tone, "The 19,769 testers, please understand this sword art within an hour." Say it. A sword art appeared in front of Chen Daoxian. This is. Chen Daoxian took a closer look and saw that it was a sword technique called Instant Shadow. Space Sword Art. Chen Daoxian is no longer a rookie when he first came into contact with wind-chasing sword art. His current kendo realm has already touched the realm of the 3rd level of sword intent. It is not an exaggeration to say that he is a kendo genius. He could naturally recognize the type of sword art in front of him at a glance. When Chen Daoxian practiced sword art, he suffered from no choice. At that time, the Chen family only had 2 first-order swordsmanships, wind-chasing sword art and covering rain sword art. Otherwise, Chen Daoxian would not necessarily understand the Siyu sword intent. With his comprehension, he may have comprehended other sword intents, such as the 5-element sword intent and the space-time sword intent. The reason why the big sect is more powerful than the Shoshian family, in addition to the talent of the disciples, is that the big sect often has a complete inheritance. The general family monks do not have this advantage. For example, before Chen Daoxian obtained the Shenyuan Sword Classic, he didn't even know that there were different types of sword intent. Even his common sense about kendo was learned from Zhou Mubai's kendo jade slips. It can be said, Chen Daoxuan's kendo can reach the current state, completely relying on his own step by step to find out, without anyone's guidance and help. Sect disciples are completely different. Once identified by Chenyuan Jianzong as an amazing kendo talent, he was selected as a direct disciple. There will be a complete training system to help the disciple choose the direction of comprehending sword intent. Although Chenyuan Jianzong can't control what kind of sword intent the disciple finally comprehends, it can work hard in this direction. For example, a direct disciple with excellent kendo talent wants to understand the sword intent of the earth element in the sword intent of the 5 elements. Chenyuan Jianzong will find various earth attribute sword tactics for him, let him practice and comprehend, and help him comprehend the earth-moving sword intent. Thus, even if the disciple finally only comprehends the branch sword meaning in the earth element sword meaning, he will never comprehend the other sword meaning in the 5 elements sword meaning. Not only that, Chenyuan Jianzong also has a lot of experience and insights from predecessors, which can guide disciples how to comprehend the complete 5 elements sword intent. Even, in order for his disciples to comprehend the complete earth-based sword intent, the various earth attribute sword tactics given by Chenyuan Jianzong are the most complete. Once all of them are cultivated to the perfect state, it is very likely that the disciple will directly comprehend the sword intent of Tuxing, rather than its branch sword intent. Don't underestimate this step ahead. Maybe when the cultivation base is low, the difference between comprehending the 5 elements sword intent and the branching sword intent cannot be seen. But when the cultivator's cultivation reaches Jindan and even nascent soul, the difference between different sword intents began to appear. Many branches of sword intent can only cultivate to the realm of the third épée at most, and not many can cultivate to the realm of the fourth épée, let alone the realm of the fifth épée. The complete 5-element sword intent does not have such troubles. Not only can it be cultivated all the way to the realm of the sword domain, but also the realm of the sixth law. As long as the cultivator can comprehend it himself, it can also be achieved without hindrance. Unlike the cultivator who has embarked on the branch of sword intent, he can only look at the cut-off road ahead and feel sad. Of course, the cultivator embarked on the road of branching sword intent, which does not mean that it is a dead end. For example, Chen Daoxian comprehends the Siyu sword intent. He can completely comprehend several branched sword intent, integrate them, and then comprehend the complete water-traveling sword intent. It's just that compared with the sword cultivator who has understood the complete water movement sword intent at the beginning of his practice, he undoubtedly has to take a lot of detours. But this is also impossible. Whoever made Chen Daoxian have no inheritance and no teaching, can get to where he is today. The effect of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic is already against the sky. The current Chen Daoxian, in addition to comprehending the complete Shui Xingjian accident. There is a second way, which is to comprehend other kinds of sword intent. Only taking the second kendo means that Chen Daoxian will be distracted from his care and will have no time to take care of Siyu Jiani. You must know that his Siyu sword intent is only one step away from the realm of the third layer of stars. After walking so far on this kendo, no one is willing to give up. Although Chen Daoxian had the help of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, he still couldn't make up his mind. In front of the palace, Chen Daoxian quickly finished reading this sword technique called Shining Shadow. Although this sword art is a space-class sword art, it is only a first-order sword art. From Chen Daoxian's point of view, it is not difficult to fully comprehend it. But to cultivate it to the perfect state within an hour, it is not something that ordinary monks can do. Even if Zhou Mubai was here, it would be difficult for him to do it. His expression was condensed. Chen Daoxian didn't dare to neglect, and quickly browsed through this instant shadow sword art. In an epiphany state. The various subtleties of this sword art were constantly comprehended by him. Chen Daoxian's mastery of the instant shadow sword art is also rising. Beginning, small success, great success, until the final consummation. Just a stick of incense. Chen Daoxian actually practiced instant shadow to a perfect state, which was much faster than when he practiced wind-chasing sword art for the first time. He knew that this was due to the enhancement of his own comprehension, and the bigger reason was the effect of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic breaking through to the second level. All right. A stick of incense completely mastered the instant shadow sword art. Chen Daoxian raised his head and looked at the indifferent Taoist in white. Play at once. Yes. Chen Daoxian bowed his hands, and immediately transformed into a flying sword, and displayed the fully comprehended instant shadow sword art in front of him. Watching the flying sword in front of him disappear and appear like a teleportation. The white-robed Taoist continued indifferently, "Please understand this sword art within an hour." Next moment, another new sword technique appeared in front of Chen Daoxian. He took a closer look and saw that it was a first-order space sword art. At this moment, Chen Daoxian could probably see that the Taoist man in white, or the person who left the inheritance, was teaching and choosing the right heir in this way. In an hour, he completely comprehended a first-order sword art. This in itself is a very high threshold. Even a kendo genius like Zhou Mubai probably couldn't do it. Not to mention the constant comprehension of new sword art like now. If it wasn't for Chen Daoxian's Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, he would have given up long ago. This is simply not something ordinary geniuses can do. Although the sword art this time is the same as the first rank, it is obviously a little more difficult than the previous instant shadow sword art. But with the blessing of 30 times his understanding, Chen Daoxian completely grasped it within a stick of incense. Really? Immediately afterwards, it was the third sword art. See this scene. Chen Daoxian was no longer nervous. No matter what the result is, being able to learn the space-based sword art that is rarely seen here is something you can't ask for. He still has nearly 5 hours to maintain his epiphany, so there is absolutely no need to worry. Soon. The third sword technique was also mastered by him. Next, Chen Daoxian mastered one first-order sword art after another. Without exception, these swordsmanships are all first-order spatial swordsmanships, and as Chen Daoxian continued to practice, he found that these spatial swordsmanships had a faint connection. Until the 9th first-order space-class sword art was mastered by Chen Daoxian. The Taoist man in white finally stopped. The 19,769th testers, you have a new opportunity to test, please choose to continue or give up. When Chen Daoxian heard this, he glanced at the hundreds of stardust in the sea and nodded, continue. Please master this sword art within half an hour. Say it. In front of Chen Daoxian, a space-class sword art appeared again. Sure enough, the difficulty of the sword art has deepened. Moreover, the time given by the white-clothed Taoist was shortened by half to half an hour. Of course, whether it was an hour or half an hour, it made no difference to Chen Daoxian at all. Anyway, it only takes a little more time for him to cultivate a sword art to the perfect state. But this time, Chen Daoxian encountered a little trouble. Due to the sudden increase in the difficulty of the sword art, Chen Daoxian was a little uncomfortable, so that the time to fully master this sword art was increased to 1.5 incense. 1.5 incense sticks, half an hour away, only half a stick of incense. In other words, the effect that he can achieve by 30 times his comprehension is not far from the difficulty given by the Taoist in white. This discovery made Chen Daoxian completely put away the contempt in his heart. The comprehension requirements for the testers are so high, obviously this inheritance is not simple. According to Daoist White Clothes, he is more than 19,000 testers who participated in this inheritance trial. That is to say, the more than 19,000 testers in front of him have not obtained this inheritance. Obviously, the difficulty of obtaining this inheritance is probably still higher than he expected. If in the past, Chen Daoxian really had no confidence. After all, judging from the effect of storing the epiphany once a month in the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, it is impossible to obtain this inheritance. Even if the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic breaks through to the 3rd floor, it still hangs. But with the Jia Yuanzhu of the Jiayao, everything becomes different. The Golden Scriptures seem to be very fond of chaos qi, and after absorbing it, it will feed back to Chen Daoxian's comprehension stardust. With these comprehension stardust, Chen Daoxian does not have to accumulate stardust every day in exchange for a stick of incense once every 30 days for epiphany time. Since then, as long as there is enough chaos qi, Chen Daoxian can always maintain 30 or more times his understanding. From the short-lived genius of a stick of incense to the lasting genius. Inside the palace. As the trial progressed, the stardust in Chen Daoxian's sea of knowledge was continuously consumed. In the end, more than 700 star dusts were all consumed, leaving only less than 30 star dust scattered in the sea of consciousness, spinning around the Golden Scriptures alone. Run out of stardust. Chen Daoxian felt the epiphany gradually disappearing, and finally woke up. Fortunately, all the 36 first-order spatial sword arts were cultivated to the perfect state by him. The 19,769th tester, you have 2 trials, please choose to continue or give up. Continue. Chen Daoxian said solemnly. Although there is no blessing of 30 times the comprehension, Chen Daoxian wants to try it once with his true comprehension. How difficult is this inheritance trial? Chapter 227. Please master this sword art within an hour. The voice of the Taoist man in white was still indifferent, without the slightest emotion. In front of Chen Daoxian. Soon a new sword technique appeared. Compared with the 36 first-order space swordsmanships in front of him, the new swordsmanship in front of him is obviously more mysterious and obscure. Second-order space sword tactics. Chen Daoxian immediately judged the rank of this sword art. Among the many sword intents, the spacetime sword intent is inherently more difficult than the 5-element sword intent, and the power of the spacetime sword intent at the same level is also stronger than the 5-element sword intent. In the same way, the difficulty of the time-space swordsmanship is also greater than that of the five-element swordsmanship. Therefore, although the sword art in front of Chen Daoxian was a second-order sword art, its difficulty was no lower than that of a third-order five-element sword art. This level of swordsmanship, it is already equivalent to the third-order spell difficulty that Zifu monks usually practice. Master it in an hour? Chen Daoxian read it like swallowing dates, and forcibly remembered it. But I still feel dizzy, and I don't have the constant comprehension that I had before with 30 times of comprehension. He stood in front of the Taoist man in white, his brows furrowed, and he said nothing. Soon, an hour passed. The time has come. If you fail to master this sword art within an hour, please choose to consume one trial opportunity to continue or quit. The expression of the white-robed Taoist did not change in the slightest, and he said coldly. Heard. Chen Daoxian frowned and said, if I quit, how can I come back here next time? For Chen Daoxian's question. As if the Taoist in white didn't hear it, he still replied mechanically, please choose to consume one trial opportunity to continue or quit. See. Chen Daoxian bowed his hands helplessly, I choose to quit. The words fall. The Taoist man in white stretched out his finger, pointed at the center of Chen Daoxian's eyebrows. Chen Daoxian instinctively wanted to dodge, but realized that he was in a state of consciousness at the moment, and there was a golden scripture sitting in the sea of knowledge, so he simply did not dodge. A spot of light rushed into Chen Daoxian's eyebrows. Immediately, he felt that his figure kept falling until he returned to the sea of consciousness. Magic Ape Mountain Cave House. In the practice room. Chen Daoxian, who was sitting cross-legged on the Wenyu futon, suddenly opened his eyes. The first time he was conscious, he touched his forehead. This is. I saw a divine rune mark appearing between his eyebrows. Chen Daoxian swept his consciousness, and he found that this divine rune mark was exactly the same as the divine rune mark between Yi Wudeo's eyebrows. It turns out that Wan Xinghai's trial inheritance has long been mastered by Chenyuan sword sect. Chen Daoxian sighed. But then it felt very normal. In the Chenyuan sword sect of Nuoda, there are always talented and evil people who discover the secrets of the sea layer of Wanxinghaixing. As the actual ruler of Wanxinghai, Chenyuan sword sect, if he does not know the inheritance of this trial, it is impossible to say. Only. Chen Daoxian's thoughts moved, and the imprint of the divine pattern on the eyebrows disappeared automatically. The center of his brows returned to their original appearance. Seeing his appearance, Chen Daoxian nodded with satisfaction. In his opinion, wearing this divine mark on his forehead has no meaning other than ostentation and showing off. After all, this is just a thing that shows the identity of the tester, and its main function is to make the tester consciously enter the test ground again. Such as Chen Daoxian. There are now 2 more chances to enter the land of trials. Chen Daoxian did not know how Yi Wudeo's status as a tester was obtained. But it must have come by coincidence, just like him. After all, in the world of immortals, there are also treasures that increase comprehension in a short period of time, such as rare treasures such as enlightenment tea. It's just that increasing comprehension in a short period of time is of little significance to the tester. Because even with a short-term increase in comprehension, he barely passed the trial level and entered the trial palace. But the next trial is the most challenging one. Such as Chen Daoxian. Under the blessing of 30 times the comprehension, the whole way was like a broken bamboo, and the 13 and 16 first-order space sword tactics were continuously cultivated to the perfect state. But after losing the blessing of the epiphany state, he was instantly beaten back to his original shape. Not to mention mastering the second-order space-like sword art given by the white-clothed Taoist within an hour. In an hour, he can't even get started. You know, Chen Daoxian's kendo talent is not bad. It can even be said to be very strong. It can be seen from this. How perverted the requirements of this trial inheritance are. To pass the inheritance trial by relying on the treasure of enlightenment tea, which can increase understanding in a short period of time, is simply a fool's dream. Chen Daoxian has a hunch that now, as long as he is willing, he can master a branch of space-type sword intent at any time. This is where the deep horror accumulates. Before he understood the Siyu sword intent, he had only mastered a first-order water-moving sword art, and he had to rely on the skill of blending the Tao with the sword and comprehend the sword intent in a clever way. But now, having mastered the 36 first-order spatial sword techniques, he does not use this trick at all. But even if I have the blessing of 30 times my comprehension, it is not an easy task to master the second-order space sword art in 1 hour. Chen Daoxian said silently, "What's more, this is just the beginning. Judging from the rules of the previous interview, it will become more and more difficult in the future. The tester will definitely be required to master a more difficult second-order space sword art in half an hour or even less." Chen Daoxian frowned and analyzed secretly, "Unless." He raised his head, "Unless I can comprehend the spatial sword intent." After a sword cultivator understands a certain sword intent, the difficulty of cultivating the corresponding sword art will be greatly reduced. For example, Chen Daoxian comprehends the Siyu sword intent, and then when he cultivates the water-traveling sword art, the difficulty will be lower than before. The higher the level of his silk rain sword intent, the more obvious the increase in comprehension of this corresponding attribute. Given that Chen Daoxian is only one step away from the Siyu sword intent triple star transformation realm, he can master a first-order water attribute sword art in a few days at most. Compared with the past that could not master a first-order water attribute sword art for several years or even decades, it was a world of difference. Because unlike spiritual root, comprehension is something that can be continuously improved with the improvement of cultivator's cultivation and realm. Chen Daoxian's current comprehension has been greatly improved compared to him in the qi refining period, especially in the comprehension of water attribute swordsmanship. In this way, for my next trial, not only do I have to prepare enough stardust, but I also need to fully understand the space sword intent. Chen Daoxian said secretly. That's right, it is the same as the master of Zhenhai Palace, who comprehends the complete spatial sword intent, not the branched sword intent of the spatial sword intent. With the background of completely mastering the 36 first-order space class sword arts, Chen Daoxian was naturally unwilling to just comprehend the branch sword intent of the space class. At the beginning, he understood the Siyu sword intent because he had no choice. Now Chen Daoxian's vision and background are completely unmatched by him at the beginning. In addition, the bounded origin orb provides him with a steady stream of comprehension stardust. As long as you have enough comprehension stardust, there is no trial you can't pass. Chen Daoxian clenched his fists and said, "Think of this." Chen Daoxian secretly calculated it. If you want to have enough comprehension stardust, you must have the Jiyuan orb. Immediately, he looked in the direction of the passage of the real demon world again. However, the real demon realm is no better than this realm. It is the realm of the real demon world. Even if I have Mi Chen Fan in my hand, it is inevitable that when the gutter capsizes, I must think of a safe method. Think for a moment. Chen Daoxian's eyes lit up. In terms of caution, the most famous person in the entire Wan Xinghai is Xinjue Jinren. A mere cultivator with Jindan cultivation level can hide for 400 or 500 years before and after the arrest of Chen Yuan Jianzong. Chen Daoxian couldn't help recalling Xinju Zhenren's methods carefully. Mi Chen Fan escaped for his life, the absolutely safe Xinjue immortal mansion and the immortal corpse clone. These conditions. It seems that Chen Daoxian basically has it. Mi Chen Fan is now in his hands. Although the otherworld channel is connected to the real demon world, the fellows here can only pass through the monks of the foundation building stage at most. That is to say, even if the world monsters found this passage, the high-level world monsters would not be able to come through. And the low-level world demon came over and had no use other than delivering food to Chen Daoxian. Thinking about it this way, this is an absolutely safe place. The only security risk is the clone. As for the real body to go, Chen Daoxian thought for a while, but decided to give up. There are countless powerhouses in the real demon world, and among these demon masters, there must be those who can block the space. If the real body goes there and meets the demon master who can block the space, Chen Daoxian will have no way to escape. Therefore, he decided to follow the example of Shinjue and use a clone. Actually, in Wan Xinghai, sacrificing avatars is not a rare secret technique. Chen Daoxian had seen this kind of secret technique in the jade slips exchanged by Chen Yuan sword sect, and the price was much cheaper than various cultivation techniques. For monks, sacrifice avatars are a thing that consumes energy and resources. Few monks choose to sacrifice avatars when their cultivation is not high. Generally speaking, only those monks who have reached Jindan or even nascent soul will choose to sacrifice and refine their clones. Because they feel that the improvement of their cultivation base has encountered a bottleneck, their own potential is exhausted, and it is difficult to improve their cultivation base. Therefore, in order to pursue the enhancement of strength, such monks will try to practice various secret methods, such as the method of avatars, the secret method of double nature infants, and so on. In the final analysis, these secret methods are only time-consuming and labor-intensive side-tracking, and they are not worth mentioning for cultivators who are pursuing the Tao. For monks with low cultivation base and high potential, the foundation building period is the time to be brave and diligent. Who would choose to practice what kind of avatar at this time? Isn't that uncomfortable? If you change it to the past. Chen Daoxian also despised the secret technique of cultivating clones. After all, adding a clone will not help the cultivator's cultivation and realm in the slightest, and it will not greatly improve the cultivator's strength. For example, Chen Daoxian is now working hard to sacrifice a clone. The cultivation base of the clone cannot exceed that of the deity. Even if the avatar and the deity have the same kendo realm, their strength is not comparable to that of the deity. Even more potential. Due to the different materials of the avatars produced by the sacrifices have different potentials. Some monks use high-level treasures to sacrifice and refine, and the clone potential is very good. And some cultivators are shy, and can only use some low-level spiritual materials to make avatars. It is difficult to say that such avatars have any potential. But no matter what kind of material it is, the avatar is refined. Its potential will not exceed the deity, because the cultivation of the clone will be restricted by the deity. This is also the reason why Shinjue couldn't exert the power of his body at all after he used the immortal corpse as a separate body for sacrifice. Chen Daoxuan's eyes narrowed, and he began to plan the next cultivation arrangement. First, use the few remaining battle exploits of the Chen family to exchange for a secret method of cultivating avatars, and then find suitable materials for cultivating avatars. After the success of the sacrifice refining clone, you can use this clone to go to the real demon world to kill the world monster and harvest the world origin beads. At the same time, the deity sits in the demon monkey mountain, and while improving his cultivation, he comprehends the spatial sword intent. With Wan Xinghai's trial inheritance, Chen Daoxian finally chose to focus on the new space sword intent. Although the Siyu sword intent, which is close to the third level of sword intent, is stronger. But compared with the complete spatial sword intent, the potential of the Siyu sword intent is too low. Even if it is the complete water-traveling sword intent, its potential is difficult to compare with the space sword intent, let alone the branch sword intent of water-traveling sword intent, the Siyu sword intent. Say it again. Chen Daoxuan's Siyu sword intent has risen to the current state, mainly relying on the epiphany ability of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. But in the end, it takes 30 days for Hongmeng to comprehend the Taoist scriptures to realize a stick of incense. Chen Daoxian has practiced for more than 10 years, and the total amount of comprehension stardust stored in total is only a few thousand. Counting it, the Jiyuan orb left by less than 10 base building stage monsters is enough to generate thousands of comprehension stardust. For Chen Daoxian, who has mastered the channel of the real demon world, it is not worth mentioning at all. The chaotic energy in the Jia Yuanzhu is the greatest confidence for Chen Daoxian to give up the Siyu sword intent and switch to the space sword intent. Figure out what to do next. Chen Daoxian no longer delays. Walk out of the cave and fly towards the main vein of Demon Ape Mountain. What, are you leaving? Outside Luo Ziyuan's cave. When Luo Li heard that Chen Daoxian had just opened a cave in Imo Yuan Mountain, he said goodbye, his pretty face was full of disbelief. Right. Chen Daoxian nodded. I suddenly remembered that there is still an important thing to do in the clan, heard. Luo Li opened a small mouth of cherry, but he hesitated. Luo Xiuyuan on the side bowed his hands and said solemnly, Lord, don't worry, I will personally guard this fellow of the real demon world, and I will never let a world demon cross the border. I am relieved by the words of the patriarch Luo. Chen Daoxian smiled and cupped his hands. Immediately, he looked at Luo Li again, cupped his hands and said, Miss Luo, take care. You, take care too. Luo Li said with a strong smile. Chen Daoxian nodded with a smile, then turned into a flash of light and disappeared in front of the two of them. Outside the cave, Luo Xiuyuan glanced at Luo Li, who wanted to wear his eyes, and sighed, don't look, he's gone too far. I know. Luo Li reluctantly retracted his gaze and said in a low voice. Luoer, forget it, he's a sword cultivator, and he's the arrogant man among the human cultivators. We're just a non-human and non-monster mermaid. You and him are destined to be impossible. I know. Seeing her daughter's appearance, Luo Xiuyuan didn't know how to comfort her. But he knew that by letting his daughter recognize the reality earlier, she would be less hurt. Although this decision was cruel, it was the least harmful way to Luo Li. Chapter 228. The Fairy City of Guang'an Prefecture. In front of a palace where the Zhou family resides. Chen Daoxian bowed his hands to a red-haired cultivator in the purple house in front of him, and said with a smile, Congratulations to Senior Zhang for his promotion, heard. Zhang Yu smiled and said, What a promotion, it's just taking over from senior brother's class, talking. Zhang Yu waved his hand, fellow Daoist Chen, don't call me from Senior Zhang and Senior Zhang. With your talent, it won't take long before you can catch up with my cultivation. You and I should be friends of the same generation. Chen Daoxian nodded eloquently, fellow Daoist Zhang, so, Ganyan Temple has now changed the residence of Zhangzhou Xianqing to Guang'an Prefecture Xianqing? That's right. Zhang Yu looked at Chen Daoxian with deep eyes, and pointed out, after the last time the Yunshao Palace competed for merit, the palace master ordered me to change the residence to the immortal city of Guang'an Mansion. Speaking of which, you are the one who made great efforts, Chen Daoyu. Nah. I heard this. Chen Daoxian waved his hands again and again, I don't dare, I'm just a little shrimp in the vortex who can't help myself. Hida Hineng can make this decision for the palace master of Qianyun Palace. It's good that you have this knowledge. Zhang Yu looked around, took 2 steps forward, and said in a very close tone, Brother Chen, you and I are both Zhangzhou cultivators. I would like to tell you a word of heart, brother, and I hope you don't mind. Brother Zhang, but that's what he said. Zhang Yu pondered for a moment. The battle between the 2 factions of the Qianyuan sword sect has been going on for a long time. Young cultivators like me who have no basic strength, must not rashly intervene in it. Brother Chen, you have a bright future, and you should understand this truth. Looking at Zhang Ye's sincere eyes, Chen Daoxian nodded solemnly, Thank you, Brother Zhang, for your suggestion. Si Chen Daoxian listened to this advice. Zhang Yu smiled gratified, and then his face returned to his businesslike appearance, and said, I don't know if Daoyu Chen is looking for me this time because this time I came to Daoyu Zhang to exchange for a method of avatar. The method of avatar? Zhang Yu frowned. With Daoyu Chen's current cultivation, what is the method of finding a clone? After speaking, Zhang Yu immediately responded, Of course, if it's inconvenient to say, I didn't ask Brother Quan Dang. Hear this. Chen Daoxian laughed and said, There's nothing inconvenient, Brother Zhang should know, maybe it won't be long before we, Wan Xinghai, will recover Jinan Pass. Chen Daoxian said, his voice gradually disappeared. Zhang Yu is so shrewd. He was so hinted that he knew Chen Daoxuan's plan instantly, and he whispered, Brother Chen plans to send a clone to participate in the war? Why, does Qianyuan Jianzong stipulate that you can't send clones to fight? Zhang Yu frowned, it's not impossible, but most of the cultivator clones are not as powerful as the deity. Besides, the battle to recover Zenangwen is just around the corner. In such a short period of time, can you improve the strength of the clones? Brother Zhang, don't worry about it, Chen Daoxian said with a smile. Increasing the strength of a clone is, in the final analysis, a waste of resources. The clone is no better than the deity, and it has to break through the cultivation step by step. The cultivator cultivating the avatar, as long as there are enough resources, the avatar can be quickly upgraded to a level comparable to that of the deity. Hearing Chen Daoxuan's inhumane words, and thinking of the massive military exploits the opponent had won in the Zhangzhou Corps Tide battle, Zhang Yu stopped talking. See, the atmosphere is a little dull. Chen Daoxian cupped his hands and said, by the way, Brother Zhang is responsible for the exchange of military exploits all the year round. Do you know what exquisite methods of avatars can be exchanged for Qianyuan's sword sect? Heard. Zhang Yu laughed, you are asking the right person. Zhang Yu searched in the storage bag, and then handed over a jade slip. Brother Chen, please take a look, this records all the secret techniques of my Qianyuan sword sect. Oh? Chen Daoxian excitedly took the jade slip and quickly checked it in front of Zhang Yu. Consciousness sinks into the jade slip. Soon, a bunch of information poured into Chen Daoxuan's sea of knowledge. Of course. Although there is a lot of information pouring into Chen Daoxuan's sea of consciousness, compared with his wider and wider sea of consciousness, it is still unknown. About half a stick of incense. Chen Daoxian figured out the type of secret method of Qianyuan Jianzong's clone. Qianyuan Jianzong's avatar secret methods can be roughly divided into 3 categories. The first category is the magic weapon clone. The so-called avatar is to use a high-level magic weapon as an avatar, and finally sacrifice it into a cultivator's avatar. There is one benefit to this avatar. That is, after the success of the avatar sacrifice, the cultivation base can generally be directly comparable to the deity, and can quickly gain extremely strong strength. But at the same time, there is also a disadvantage, that is, limited by the grade of the magic weapon. This kind of clone basically has no potential at all. For example, a clone made from a third-order magic weapon can only reach the cultivation level of the Zifu period at most. Even if the cultivation base of the deity is upgraded to Jindan or Nascent Soul in the future, the avatar will still be the cultivation base of Zifu, and there will be no improvement in the slightest. The second category. It is the avatar of the Lingbao class. The so-called avatars of the spiritual treasure category are to use special treasures such as various spiritual plants, spiritual materials, or spiritual roots of heaven and earth to sacrifice and refine avatars. This kind of avatar is compared to the magic weapon avatar. If you don't just succeed in the sacrifice, you will gain a very strong strength, which needs to be cultivated slowly. But at the same time, the potential of the Lingbao clone is much greater than that of the magic weapon clone. In the future, if the cultivator is willing to spend enough energy and resources, he can even raise it to a level comparable to that of the cultivator. Of course. There is also a limit to this improvement. This limit is the limit of Lingbao itself. For example, a clone whose heal is the fourth-order heaven and earth spiritual root, even if a monk is willing to spend a lot of energy and resources, at most it can be upgraded to the nascent soul cultivation base. But this is basically the limit. There is no chance against the sky. It is impossible to continue to break the heals and upgrade to the primordial spirit cultivation. Of course. It's hard to say whether the cultivator's deity can achieve Yuanshan, let alone a clone. Therefore, many cultivators will choose Lingbao avatars when they choose to sacrifice and refine avatars. First, Lingji and other spiritual treasures are undoubtedly much cheaper than high-level magic weapons. Second, the potential of Lingbao clones is greater than that of magic weapon clones, so they are naturally more favored by monks. The third category is the flesh and blood clone. As the name suggests, a flesh and blood clone is a clone made by using the flesh and blood of oneself or other beings. Russian Jurin's avatar, which is made by immortal corpse sacrifice, is a kind of flesh and blood avatar. Once this kind of avatar is successfully cultivated, it has the greatest potential. If the aptitude of the avatar itself is better than that of the deity, then once the sacrifice is successful, it is not the avatar that is a drag on the deity, but the deity that is a drag on the deity. Because the clone will be limited by the cultivation of the deity. For example, Shenjuezhen is a typical deity dragging down the clone. Although the flesh and blood clone has great potential, this clone also has a disadvantage, that is, it is difficult to obtain materials. After all, not everyone can go against the sky like Shenjuezhenren, and can use a corpse of an immortal to sacrifice a clone. Therefore, many monks who choose flesh and blood avatars will cut a piece of flesh and blood from themselves, supplemented by a lot of resources, and sacrificing them into avatars. Once this kind of avatar is successfully cultivated, its potential and strength are all different from the original one. These three types of avatar methods are all the avatar secret methods that Qianyuan Jianzong can exchange. After reading the introduction in Yujin, Chen Daoxian took his divine sense out of the jade slip, raised his head and said, "Brother Zhang, I choose to exchange this for Jia, herd." Zhang Yu took the jade slip and checked it out, with an unexpected expression on his face. The secret method of avatar in for Jia is a method of avatars of flesh and blood. Brother Chen chose this secret method of avatars, thinking that he was interested in Taizhou's secret treasure for cultivating avatars of flesh and blood. Hearing this, Chen Daoxian was slightly taken aback. The secret treasure of cultivating flesh and blood clones? Why, Brother Chen, don't you know? Zhang Yu was also stunned, and immediately slapped his forehead, shook his head and laughed and said, "Don't blame Brother Chen, I did the exchange of merits in the Cloud Palace based on the cultivator's cultivation, and I forgot that Brother Chen still established the foundation." After he finished speaking, he handed over to beg for mercy again and again. See. Chen Daoxian only smiled bitterly. It seems that in Sangzhou cultivator's eyes, although Chen Daoxian is not a Zifu cultivator, he is better than a Zifu cultivator, and no one will treat him as a foundation-building cultivator. Brother Chen, let's see. With that said, Zhang Yu took out a jade slip again. Chen Daoxian took the jade slip and checked it again. Sure enough, the treasures recorded in this jade slip are much more diverse than the exchange jade slip that Chen Daoxian obtained for the first time. Moreover, most of them are treasures that can only be used by cultivators of the Zifu. This is. When Chen Daoxian saw a treasure as bright as a blood diamond, his eyes narrowed. The secret treasure he saw was nothing else, it was the blood crystal he obtained in the real demon world. Chen Daoxian didn't think much, and asked casually, "Brother Zhang said that the secret treasure for cultivating flesh and blood clones refers to this kind of treasure called blood crystal?" "Right." Zhang Yu nodded and said with a smile, "Blood crystals are a special product of Taizhou, which can not only cultivate flesh and blood clones, but also enhance the cultivation of cultivators. It's just that blood crystals are very precious. I heard that at the auction in Taizhou, a blood crystal can be sold for a sky-high price of more than 100,000 spirit stones, so few monks are prodigal to use it to refine their bodies. In addition, every time the blood crystal appears, it is quickly divided up by the monks in Taizhou. It is normal that you have never heard of this kind of treasure." Zhang Yu paused. If you want to cultivate a flesh and blood clone based on your own flesh and blood, you need at least 100 blood crystals, that is, 10 million spirit stones. Speaking of this, Zhang Yu shook his head, stunned for Chen Daoxian's prodigal. Although Zhang Yu joined the Qianyuan Jianzong's Qianyun temple, he was born in a loose cultivator after all, and his talent couldn't compare to an arrogant cultivator like Chen Daoxian. Therefore, for Chen Daoxian, who spends tens of millions of spirit stones at every turn, in his opinion, he is simply a loser. To know. With so many spirit stones, you can basically buy a Zifu pill from the auction house. With the Purple Palace pill, it is not impossible to open up the Purple Palace, and at least there is a 50% certainty. Isn't this more cost-effective than sacrificing or refining a clone? Besides, 100 blood crystals are only a preliminary success in refining the clone. At this time, the cultivation level of the flesh and blood clone is only at the qi refining stage. If you want to upgrade it to the foundation building stage in a short period of time, you might have to smash millions of spiritual stones into it. It is so time-consuming and laborious, and it is not wise to only obtain a foundation building combat power. But soon. Zhang Yu thought of Chen Daoxuan's terrifying kendo realm again, and couldn't help but understand why the other party wanted to sacrifice his avatar. For ordinary monks, it is meaningless to spend more than 10 million spirit stones to cultivate a clone with a foundation-building cultivation base. But for Chen Daoxian, the foundation-building avatar cultivated with more than 10 million spirit stones has the combat power of the Purple Mansion, so it cannot be said to be a disadvantage. After all, a Xifu's combat power is worth more than 10 million spirit stones. So, wouldn't it be very difficult to buy 100 blood crystals? Chen Daoxian frowned. Heard. Zhang Yu opened his mouth, not knowing how to answer. Chen Daoxian didn't say that the price was high, but he just felt that 10 million spirit stones might not necessarily be able to buy 100 blood crystals. It was so light and fluffy that he didn't take the huge sum of 10,000 spirit stones into his eyes. Zhang Yu felt helpless. It can't be said that it is very difficult, Zhang Yu frowned. If you want to buy blood crystals, in the end it depends on your luck, brother Chen. Luck? Chen Daoxian was stunned when he heard this. Buying things depends on luck, which can only prove that the supply of blood crystals is not very stable. Yes, luck, Zhang Yu nodded, although most of the time, blood crystals will be scrambled by Taizhou monks, but it is not absolute, because Taizhou will produce a lot of blood crystals from time to time. At that time, the price of blood crystals will plummet, so whether Brother Chen can get his wish or not depends on your luck. I see. Chen Daoxian nodded clearly. Hearing these words, Chen Daoxian understood in his heart that this Taizhou must also have a passage to the real demon world, and maybe, the local high-level monks in Taizhou participated in the development of the real demon world. Even there is more than one channel in the real demon world in Taizhou, otherwise they would not be able to produce so many blood crystals. To know if the blood crystal production is scarce, it will definitely not spread. For example, Chen Daoxian has a blood crystal in his hand, which will definitely not be disclosed to the outside world. The fact that this thing can spread in Taizhou, and even go to auction, proves that blood crystals in Taizhou may already have the most basic production channels. In other words, Qianyuan Jianzong is likely to have established a certain foundation on the opposite side of the Taizhou channel. Think of this. Chen Daoxian asked calmly, Brother Zhang, this blood crystal is so magical, I don't know how it was produced. Hear this. Zhang Ye's eyes flickered slightly, and he shook his head and said, I don't know that very well. Brother Chen, you know that I have been on the front line of Izumo until recently, and I was recently transferred back to Cangzhou to be in charge of Cangzhou affairs. How can I know about Taizhou? What about the situation? Zhang Yu said with a ha. Hearing this, Chen Daoxian suddenly smiled, that's right, it's my brother Meng Lang. Brother Chen asked this for. Why else? Chen Daoxian said with a wry smile, I heard that blood crystals can help cultivators refine their bodies, can you not be tempted? Brother Zhang, you also know that low-level spiritual rice is less and less helpful for cultivators, while high-level spiritual rice is expensive. Hard to find. I'm thinking if there is any way to cultivate blood crystals. Hear this. Zhang Yu couldn't help laughing, he pointed at Chen Daoxian and said with a smile, Brother Chen, not to mention whether this blood crystal can be cultivated artificially, even if he can artificially cultivate it, do you think there will be a family willing to sell this cultivation method? What Brother Zhang said is very true. Chen Daoxian put on a stunned expression and cupped his hands. Chapter 229. After getting the secret method of cultivating avatars in Forjia, Chen Daoxian said goodbye to Zhang Yu without further delay. Watching Chen Daoxian leave, there was a thoughtful look in Zhang Ye's eyes. Southwest waters of Wangxinghai, Shuanghu Island in Guang'an Prefecture. An escaping light crossed the sky and landed outside the mountain protection formation on Shuanghu Island. When the protective formation was turned on, Chen Daoxuan's figure was like a bubble melted into the water curtain, into the fourth-order protective formation. Back at Shuanghu Island, Chen Daoxian immediately expanded his consciousness. In a flash, he locked on the target. Shuanghu Island Qin Family Council Hall. Qin Dalian only felt a headache these days. Since she was appointed by the young patriarch as the finance minister of the Qin family and took charge of the financial power of the family, the monks of the Taoist generation and the monks of the blessing generation in the clan came to her door one after another and asked her for funds from various departments, such as the Ministry of the Army, the Ministry of Education, and the Institute of Magical Instruments. Qin Dalian naturally did not dare to delay, and the funds that should be given would not be less. However, some departments whose framework had just been set up also asked her for funds, which made Qin Dalian very headache. In particular, the family's newly established Lingmai Management Department. The Spiritual Vessel Management Department, referred to as the Spiritual Management Department, is responsible for managing all the spiritual vessels within the Qin family's sphere of influence, including the use, maintenance, and promotion of the spiritual vessels, as well as the collection of the spiritual vessel tax. It can be said that this is a department with considerable power in the Qin family. Not to mention the use, maintenance and promotion of the spiritual veins, just collecting the spiritual vein tax gives the Spiritual Management Department great power. Actually, the Lingmai tax of the Spiritual Management Department of the Qin family was a name learned from Qianyuan Jianzong. As the ruler of Wangxinghai, Qianyuan Jianzong, in addition to its own direct jurisdiction, has adopted the method of spiritual vein tax for the fiefs of various states to tax the various immortal clans in Wangxinghai. The so-called spiritual pulse tax is to levy the tax burden according to the level of each spiritual pulse. Qianyuan Jianzong's spiritual vein tax is collected every 10 years, and the tax starts from the third-order spiritual vein. Based on the fact that the Qin family currently has 2 third-order spiritual veins. Each third-order spiritual vein needs to pay a spiritual vein tax of 100,000 spiritual stones to Qianyuan Jianzong every year. 10 years is the spiritual tax of 2 million spiritual stones. This tax burden is not too heavy. This is also the reason why the Yang family of Guang'an Prefecture clearly has the ability to cultivate fourth-order spiritual veins, but has not cultivated them. Because the spiritual vein tax of the fourth-order spiritual veins is as high as 1 million spirit stones every year, 10 years is 10 million spirit stones. 10 million spirit stones are enough to buy a Zifu Dan and add a Zifu cultivator to the family. The Yang family naturally did not want to waste it in vain. Only a big family with a profound background like the Zhou family can bear the tax burden of the fourth-order spiritual veins. The Lingmai tax levied by the Qin family's Lingguan department is mainly due to the difference in the objects levied compared with the Lingmai tax of Qianyuan Jianzong. Qianyuan Jianzong levied taxes on the immortal cultivators with spiritual veins, while the Qin family levied taxes on merchants and loose cultivators within their sphere of influence. In fact, every fairy city has such a tax department, such as the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture. The Qin family's business of magic tools in Sangxiafang City has to pay taxes to the Zhou family. When the Yang family formed the Guang'an Immortal League, it was precisely because of this interest. In the entire Guang'an Prefecture, only the Xianqing family of Guang'an Prefecture was the only one, and the taxes paid by the scattered cultivators of Guang'an Prefecture and various families, except for the fixed spiritual pulse tax for the Qianyuan sword sect, all belonged to the Zhou family. This naturally made the other big clans headed by the Yang family dissatisfied. And now, the Qin family has also established Guanhai Xianqing, so naturally they have to hold this part of the interests in their hands. Escape light descends. Qin Daoxuan's figure appeared in the side hall of the council hall. Lift your legs into the side hall. After several turns, Qin Daoxian found Qin Dalian who was working at the desk. Beside Qin Dalian, there are several young maids who are helping her sort out various accounts. Young Patriarch. When a maid saw Qin Daoxian, she was stunned for a moment, and then she saluted in surprise. Hearing the voice of the maid, Qin Dalian, who was so busy, raised her head. When she saw Qin Daoxian, she quickly stood up and said in surprise, "Young Patriarch, are you back?" Qin Daoxian nodded with a smile, and then waved to the maid in the house. See. The maidservants bowed and slowly retreated. Qin Daoxian walked to the chair opposite Qin Dalian and sat down, waved his hand and said, What are you looking at me for? Sit down. Hearing this, Chen Dalian smiled slyly and sat down gracefully. Looking at your frowning face just now, why, the family's financial power is not easy to grasp, really. When Chen Dalian heard this, her face wrinkled again, and she said coquettishly, "Young patriarch, why don't you transfer me back to the pharmaceutical factory, which is much more worry-free than here?" You, Chen Daoxian pointed at the tip of Chen Daolian's nose, shook his head and said, "It's not enough to want to save my heart, there are not many people in the family who have the qualifications, ability, and can make me feel at ease. And you are one of them, so you must manage the family finances for me." Hearing Chen Daoxuan's praise, Chen Daolian's originally swaying mind slowly became firm again. She nodded vigorously at Chen Daoxian. Chen Daoxian smiled and said, "Tell me, what difficulties did you encounter?" "It's the spirit management department." Chen Dalian quickly explained the problems encountered by the spiritual management department. "What do you mean, the spiritual management department is blocked from collecting the spiritual vein tax from the loose cultivators?" "Right." Chen Dalian nodded, "The Ministry of Spiritual Management has been asking my Ministry of Finance for money these days, saying that there is no money to be promoted to the spiritual vessel." Speaking of this, Chen Dalian was a little angry. The Spiritual Management Department is responsible for collecting the tax on the use of spiritual veins from merchants and loose cultivators. It is strange that they have no money. In fact, Chen Dalian did not know. Every year, the maintenance of each spiritual meridian in the Chen family requires a considerable loss of spiritual stones. And cultivating and promoting spiritual veins is even more terrifying. A decade ago, Shuanghu Island has a radius of thousands of miles, and it is a barren place. Not to mention the spiritual veins, there are not even a few duckweed-like spiritual eyes. Just 10 years. Not only Shuanghu Island has a third-order spiritual vein, but the neighboring Sequoia Island has also cultivated a third-order spiritual vein. In addition, there are first-order and second-order spiritual veins in the surrounding thousands of miles of sea. The number of spiritual veins in the Chen family's hands has reached 3 digits. Wanting to cultivate so many spiritual veins in such a short period of time, it is a massive amount of spiritual stones to smash them down. It can be said, the Spirit Management Department was the most expensive department among all the departments of the Chen family. The newly appointed Chen Dalian did not know the consumption of the Spiritual Management Department. As the person who controls the overall situation of the Chen family, Chen Daoxian naturally knew how terrifying the expenditure of the Chen family to cultivate the spiritual veins. He thought for a while and said, "The Spirit Management Department directly collects taxes from loose cultivators, and loose cultivators who are accustomed to their freedom are naturally unwilling. In fact, we can use another way to collect taxes from the loose cultivators." Another way? Chen Dalian was stunned for a moment, not knowing what Chen Daoxian meant. How does the Spiritual Management Department collect the spiritual vein tax from loose cultivators now? Like the merchants, according to the length of time the loose cultivator stays in each spiritual vein, it will be collected once a year. Hear this. Chen Daoxian shook his head. Loose cultivators are deducted to death one by one, how can they obediently pay this tax? When you really want to collect taxes, others will run away in advance. Anyway, all the immortal cities in Guang'an Prefecture are now absorbing loose cultivators to increase the popularity of the immortal cities. The Chen family still has the energy to catch these loose cultivators who run away without paying taxes in advance. If the scattered cultivators are in a hurry, they will run away collectively. Maybe Guanhai Xiancheng will follow in the footsteps of Zhangzhou Xiancheng and become a ghost town. Therefore, forcible taxation is not advisable. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxian had an idea and said, obviously, since this kind of taxation is not advisable, we can use another method, such as selling lingfu to the loose cultivators. Sell lingfu? Chen Dalian was stunned, not knowing what medicine was sold in Chen Daoxuan's gourd. But the young patriarch, according to the rules of the major immortal cities, the lingfu has always been rented but not sold. Does selling the lingfu mean selling the spiritual vein? At that time, does this spiritual vein belong to my Qin family, or belongs to the loose cultivator? Chen Daolian said anxiously, besides, the price of Lingfu is high, how can ordinary loose cultivators come up with so many spiritual stones at once? Only Chen Daoxian could think of such a prodigal behavior. Seeing Chen Daolian's eager look, Chen Daoxian smiled and said, "Don't worry." He cleared his throat and said slowly, "The price of Lingfu is high, we can let the loose cultivators pay in installments." Installment? Chen Daolian was attracted by Chen Daoxuan's new term. Although she didn't know the meaning of installment payment, she could guess. What the young patriarch means is that a loose cultivator only needs to pay a small amount of spiritual stone every year to have a spiritual residence in the Sevuing fairy city. Right. Chen Daoxian nodded. But, what if the loose cultivators don't pay in the future? According to the contract, my Chen family naturally has the right to take back the Lingfu. This. Chen Daolian frowned. She felt that this approach was unreliable, but she didn't know how to refute it. Because for wandering loose cultivators, having a spiritual land of cultivation that belongs to them completely can be said to be the common wish of all loose cultivators. In fact, scattered cultivation is the lowest level in the world of immortal cultivation. Their lives were much harder than before the Chen family made a fortune. Not to mention cultivating the spiritual veins by themselves, even going to the major immortal cities to rub the spiritual veins for a few days, for them, it is like cutting flesh. Especially before the Guang'an Xianmeng was established. The days of the loose cultivators are even more miserable. There are often scattered cultivators who will go to the immortal city of Guang'an Mansion to rub their spiritual veins during the day, and at night, they will be driven out of the immortal city of Guang'an Mansion by the cultivators of the Zhou family. After all, not every loose cultivator has the courage to go to the battlefield of the Iron Kingdom to strive for a better future. If I remember correctly, most of the Lingfu in Guanhai Xianqing are vacant, right? Seems like it. Chen Daolian nodded. Although she was not specifically responsible for the management of Guanhai Xianqing, she still heard about the vacancy of Guanhai Xiancheng's Lingfu. That's why. It is because the loose cultivator dislikes paying a large amount of spirit stones every year, but can only rent the spirit mansion, which is very uneconomical. Generally, only the children of the family who have been running business in Guanhai Xianqing for a long time will rent the Lingfu in Guanhai Xianqing. Look, the scattered cultivators have such a great demand for the spiritual mansion, and our spiritual mansion is so vacant. Tell me, is this a waste? Young patriarch, no matter how much it is wasted, those spiritual palaces belong to my Qin family. You, take a long-term view. Lingfu is indeed a resource for us, but it is not the most scarce resource for my Qin family. Hearing this, Chen Daolian lowered her head in thought. Chen Daolian can be valued by Chen Daoxian, and she is naturally a smart person. She quickly understands the deep meaning of Chen Daoxian. Chen Daoxian looked at her. What do you think is the most scarce resource in my Qin family? A monk? That's right. Chen Daoxian immediately showed a teachable expression, and then he said solemnly, now that the Cangzhou business alliance is newly established, the major families in Cangzhou seem to be in harmony on the surface, but in fact, everyone wants to fight for the leadership of the Cangzhou business alliance. The Zhou family is like this, the Zhang family in Jinan House is like this, and my Qin family is naturally not far behind. The most important thing to grasp the dominance of the Cangzhou Business Alliance is not the so-called voting rights of the Cangzhou Business Alliance. It is just a false name and has no practical effect. For my Qin family, the most important thing is to build Guanhai Xianqing as prosperous as the original Cangzhou Xianqing, and even form a master-servant relationship with the major fairy cities in Cangzhou. And to do this, the scale of my Guanhai Xianqing must be expanded by at least 10 times. Do the math, how much loose cultivation does it take to do this? Hiss. After a little calculation, Chen Daolian only felt her scalp tingling. Now Guanhai Xianqing has nearly 500,000 cultivators, although it is not comparable to the scale of nearly 1 million monks in Guang'an Palace Xianqing, and even compared with Linghui Xianqing, the two are only on par. But you must know that Guanhai Immortal City is the newest immortal city in Guang'an Prefecture. Moreover, the background of the Qin family is also the shallowest among the major families in Guang'an Prefecture. It is a miracle that Guanhai Xianqing can develop to this point in such a short period of time. However, what do we need so many cultivators for? After all, the loose cultivators are still too poor. Although there are many of them, their spending power is far less than that of the family cultivators. On the surface, it does. Chen Daoxian nodded, but think about it, what if you let them enter the magic weapon factory in the future? The magic weapon factory, heard. Chen Daolian was completely stunned. Even after the establishment of the pharmaceutical factory, the profit of the magic tool factory has lagged far behind that of the pharmaceutical factory, but the Qin family's magic tool factory is, after all, a weapon for the rise of the Qin family's fortune. Just let loose cultivators enter the factory. But the young patriarch, wouldn't this reveal the family's secrets? It is true that a part of it will be exposed, but as long as our strength is strong enough, this risk is completely bearable. Chen Daoxian paused. The biggest secret of the magic weapon factory lies in the Rongling furnace. As long as the refining method of the Rongling furnace is guarded, there is no fear of exposure. In Wangxinghai, which powerful family has no secrets? Only the weak will do everything possible to keep secrets, the strong do not need it. Besides, it is not to let loose cultivators enter the factory now. What are you anxious about? Chen Daoxian shook his head and smiled. Daolian, you have to remember that, as the helm of the family, in addition to the immediate interests, everything we do has to plan for the future. The issuance of banknotes is like this, and the same is true for Guanhai Xianqing to absorb loose cultivators. Talking. Chen Daoxian waved his hand. An image of a map of Zhangzhou appeared in front of the two of them. Chen Daoxian stretched out his hand and said, "Look, this is all the immortal cities in Zhangzhou." On the map, around Guanhai Xianqing, red dots are densely distributed throughout Zhangzhou. Among them, the red dot of Guanhai Xianqing is the largest and brightest. These red dots are connected by dotted lines. These dotted lines are the routes of the large transport ships of the Zhangzhou Business Alliance. When the time is right, these immortal cities and their families will become the raw material supply and commodity export places for my Qin family. At that time, you will know that the real terrifying plunder in this world is often bloodless. Chapter 230. Inside the family hall. Chen Daolian looked at the young patriarch who was talking eloquently in front of him, her eyes full of admiration. Ah! Seeing Chen Daolian's increasingly confused but unaware eyes, Chen Daoxian closed his mouth decisively. Cough, in short, you can let the spiritual management department do as I say. Chen Daoxian coughed dryly. Yes, young patriarch. Chen Daolian nodded happily. Immediately, she seemed to remember something and asked, "Do you have any other orders, young patriarch?" Chen Daoxian pondered for a while. Daolian, without affecting the development of the family, how many spiritual stones can the clan library take out now? Let me do the math. Chen Daolian didn't answer immediately, but looked down at the ledger on the desk. Half an hour. Chen Daolian raised her head and said, "Young patriarch, without affecting the development of the family, my Qin family can draw out 340 million spiritual stones at most." Hearing this amazing number, Chen Daoxian just nodded slightly, and did not show too surprised expression. Regarding the family's financial situation, although Chen Daoxian didn't know the specific figures, he still had a general idea. Hundreds of millions of spirit stones were naturally a fantastic number for the former Qin family, but for today's Qin family, it is less than the annual output value of the Shuanghu Island Industrial Zone. Especially after the establishment of the Zhangzhou Business Alliance, the commerce and trade of the entire Zhangzhou are unprecedentedly prosperous. Thanks to the superb productivity of the magic tool factory and the medicinal herb factory, the magic tools and medicinal herbs of the Qin family on Shuanghu Island are now well known throughout Zhangzhou. Countless family cultivators and Zhangzhou loose cultivators all wanted to request the purchase of goods from the Qin family on Shuanghu Island. Because compared with other families' elixirs, the Qin family's elixirs are inexpensive. As long as you're not stupid, you know how to choose. If it weren't for the limited production capacity of the Shuanghu Island Industrial Zone, the Qin family might have occupied the entire Zhangzhou market for magical medicines. Even if the production capacity is insufficient. The Qin family on Shuanghu Island is also the largest supplier of low-level magic tools and low-level medicinal pills in Zhangzhou, firmly occupying the market for low-level magic tools and low-grade medicinal pills. 340 million spirit stones. Qin Daoxian pondered for a moment. So, the production of magical instruments and medicinal herbs in the Shuanghu Island Industrial Zone has now risen to a new level? Yes, young patriarch. Talking about the core interests of the family, Qin Daolian's tone became slightly excited. Since last year, the annual output value of the family magic weapon factory has reached 250 million, and the annual output value of the medicinal herb factory has exceeded 300 million spirit stones. The magic weapon factory has expanded from one large factory to 3 large factories now, and the pharmaceutical factory also has 2 large factories. If it weren't for the lack of family cultivators, we could have doubled our production capacity 10-fold or even more than 100-fold. Now, the family's annual profit from Shuanghu Island Industrial Zone is as high as more than 200 million spirit stones. When it comes to Shuanghu Island Industrial Zone, every member of the Qin clan will be sincerely proud. The Qin family started from small flying sword workshops and grew step by step, and now has 3 large magic weapon factories. The magic weapon factory on Shuanghu Island is no longer just the production of flying swords. The Qin family's magic weapon factory has long since started producing various magic tools, including flying swords. Even the precious defensive magic weapon such as spirit armor, the magic weapon factory of the Qin family is preparing the production line and starting to enter the mass production stage. It can be said. In the exploration of industrializing the production of various instruments, Qin Daoxian is just a pioneer, and the monks who gradually grow up are the ones who really carry them forward. This is also the result that Qin Daoxian wants to see. The road of industrialization cannot rely on only one person, even if this person has vision and cognition far beyond the world. Only the group can truly realize industrialization. In this world, this group is the Shouxian family power with the Qin family as the core. Seeing Qin Daoxuan's expression, Qin Daolian thought that there were not enough spirit stones, and hurriedly said, "If the young patriarch thinks it is not enough, I can ask Brother Daochuan to urgently borrow a spirit stone." Speaking of this, Qin Daolian covered her mouth and laughed lightly. "Everyone in the clan says I'm a little rich woman. How do they know that the place where my Qin family is really rich is the treasury in the hands of Brother Daochuan?" Hear this. Qin Daoxian also laughed. After these years of operation, Lingshi coin has become a new currency in circulation not only in Guanhai Xiancheng, but also in the entire Qin family's sphere of influence. The success of Lingshi coin depends on the consistent reputation of the Chongping Central Bank. This kind of credit was accumulated little by little in exchange with the Guanhai Xiancheng family cultivator and the loose cultivator who never owed money. In today's Guanhai Xiancheng, no monk would doubt the credibility of the spirit stone coins. This is the biggest gain of Qin Daoxuan's issuance of Lingshi coins so far. Even in the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture, some monks began to use this new type of currency. After all, loose cultivators are mobile, and with their migration, the scope of use of spirit stone coins is also spreading out a little bit. This kind of diffusion is silent, but it works better than any hype, because this kind of diffusion is completely spontaneous behavior among loose cultivators. Unlike when Qin Jiagang implemented Lingshi coins in Guanhai Xiancheng, he had to rely on the strong pressure of the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone. The reason why Lingshi coins cannot be used in the entire Guang'an Prefecture now is because of the inconvenience of exchange. For example, a loose cultivator wants to use spirit stone coins in the immortal city of Guang'an, but the vast majority of monks in the immortal city of Guang'an do not agree with this currency. Unless the object of the transaction with him is also from Guanhai Xiancheng. If the Qin family could establish a branch in Xiancheng, Guang'an Prefecture, to exchange spirit stones, the result would be very different. Driven by the scattered cultivators of Guanhai Xiancheng, maybe the spirit stone coins can really be circulated in the Xianqing of Guang'an Prefecture. Of course. The premise is that the Zhou family, who is the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture, does not stop it. If the Zhou family does not allow this currency to be circulated in the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture, the Qin family has nothing to do. But the better news is that perhaps the usage rate of spirit stone coins in the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture is not high, and the Zhou family is not aware of the threat of spirit stone coins for the time being. Even among the monks in the Zhou family, there are many monks who use the new currency of spirit stone coins. Inside the hall. After listening to Qin Daolian's suggestion, Qin Daoxian shook his head. Forget it, 340 million spirit stones are more than enough, and the central bank's silver treasury is temporarily moved. Yes. Qin Daolian hesitated, then nodded obediently. Seeing her appearance, Qin Daoxian still didn't know what she was thinking, and said with a smile, "Why, do you think it's a waste to keep such a large sum of spirit stones sealed in the silver vault? It feels a bit wasteful." Actually, you are right. It is indeed a huge waste to put so many spiritual stones in the silver treasury as a reserve. Qin Daoxian nodded in agreement and then said, "However, this kind of waste is necessary." He turned to ask, "Daolian, why do you think I will promote the new currency of Lingxi coin?" "Young patriarch, you said that it is to have enough trading currency to pave the way for the future expansion of the family's industrial production capacity." "You're only right a little bit." Qin Daoxian paused. He grabbed a bunch of melon seeds from the fruit plate on the table, and spread them out on the table at will. He pointed to the pile of melon seeds on the table and said, "Look, the pile of melon seeds on the table is like the total amount of spirit stones in Guang'an Prefecture." With that said, Qin Daoxian drew out a small part from the pile of melon seeds, and continued, "This small pile is the total amount of spirit stones that my Qin family owns. So now, every time we issue a spirit stone coin, it is equivalent to confiscating one spirit stone circulating on the market in Guang'an Prefecture. With the productivity of my Qinjia industrial zone, what do you think will happen in the end?" Qin Daolian frowned. After thinking for a moment, she raised her head and said, "Will there be fewer and fewer spirit stones in circulation in Guang'an Prefecture?" "Bingo!" Qin Daoxian nodded in relief. "There will be fewer and fewer spirit stones in circulation in Guang'an Prefecture, and more spirit stone coins in circulation. This will not be transferred by people's will. Because the productivity of my Qinjia Shuanghu Island industrial zone is far greater than that of other outsiders. The family's productivity is more advanced. By the end." Qin Daoxian abruptly swiped the seeds on the table. "When all these spirit stones are earned by my Qin family, only the spirit stone coins issued by the Chongping Central Bank will be in circulation in the market. At that time, in Guang'an Prefecture, spirit stone coins will be the only currency in circulation. But the total amount of spirit stones in Guang'an Prefecture is not static, especially now that the Zhangzhou Business Alliance is established, and the trade between our Guang'an Prefecture and foreign governments is becoming more and more frequent. Isn't that a good thing?" Qin Daoxian looked at Qin Daolian with a faint smile on his face. "How is this?" Qin Daolian said, and suddenly woke up. After all, Zhangzhou is not a bigger Guang'an mansion. The total amount of spirit stones in Guang'an Prefecture is limited. Even if the amount of spirit stones in Zhangzhou is 10 or 100 times that of Guang'an Prefecture, there is also a limit. In this way, the Qin family can still use the advanced productive forces of industrialization to hollow out the spiritual stones of Zhangzhou little by little. As for the speed of hollowing out the spirit stone, it completely depends on the process of industrialization of the Qin family. With the current productivity of the Shuanghu Island industrial zone, if you want to hollow out all the spiritual stones in Zhangzhou, even hundreds of years of time for the Qin family are not enough. But what if Guanhai Xianqing becomes an industrial fairy city in the future? Qin Daolian immediately thought of the plan of the young patriarch to recruit loose cultivators. Isn't this preparation for human resources for the future industrialization of Guanhai Xianqing? This moment, Qin Daolian was completely convinced. She felt that everything in Zhangzhou, whether it was a family cultivator or a loose cultivator, were just pieces on the chessboard, while Chen Daoxian was the flag bearer hiding behind the chessboard. If it wasn't for the young patriarch telling her all this, she would never have realized that the young patriarch's plan was so far-reaching. But when you think about it, it all came naturally. The only variable is strength. Chen Daoxian seemed to see through Chen Daolian's thoughts and said, if you want to accomplish all this, strength is the prerequisite, otherwise, others will have the ability to lift the table at any time. Chen Daolian nodded in agreement. The rules of this world, in the final analysis, are no different from the previous life, and even more naked. In Wanxinghai, everyone was suppressed by the Qianyuan sword sect above their heads, and everyone was a little more disciplined. If it is in Xianyun continent, it is not uncommon for monks to destroy their families because of competition for resources. But how to follow the rules? Once the Chen family touches the core interests of others, other families will definitely resist. Even the Zhou family, who is as good as the Chen family, now wears a pair of trousers, no exception. In this regard, as the helm of the Chen family on Shuanghu Island, Chen Daoxian is very sober. His personal friendship with Zhou Mubai belongs to personal friendship, and the family's interests belong to the family's interests, which should not be confused. 340 million spirit stones is a huge sum of money. Even if the Chen family wanted to draw such a large sum of spirit stones, it was not something that could be done at the click of a button. Moreover, even Chen Daoxuan's high-end storage bag could not hold so many spiritual stones. Without any choice, Chen Daoxian had to order the family to buy more high-end storage bags to hold the spirit stones. This trip to Taizhou, Chen Daoxian intends to go alone. After all, in the family, he has the highest cultivation base and the fastest evasion speed. The other monks followed him, but instead slowed him down. Say it again. Chen Daoxuan's trip was just to buy blood crystals, and there was absolutely no need to bring family monks. 3 full days. Chen Daolian prepared all the spirit stones properly. Twin Lakes Island. In Chen Daoxuan's Lingfu courtyard, Chen Daoxian, who was sitting cross-legged on the Wenyu futon, suddenly opened his eyes, his face full of surprise, and said, "At last I have saved 30 stardust." Say it. He sank his consciousness into the sea of consciousness. Within the sea of consciousness, 30 stardust revolved continuously around the golden scriptures. Compared with the spectacular scene of more than 700 stardust a few days ago, the 30 stardust above the sea of consciousness is somewhat isolated. Below the stardust, it is the sea of divine light with a radius of nearly 10 miles. After several months of cultivation, the sea of divine light expanded from a diameter of 100 feet to a diameter of 10 miles. Compared with the time when I first cultivated, the area has been enlarged by many times. But compared with the 100-mile diameter of the sea of consciousness, it is still a long way off. Chen Daoxian estimated that it would take at least a year for the sea of light to reach the limit of the sea of consciousness. Actually, this speed is already quite fast. At that time, in order to cultivate the soul-determining divine light, Shinjue Jinren burned, looted the elixir to restore divine consciousness in Cangzhou, Jingzhou, and Taizhou. Even so, it took Shinjue Jinren several years to expand the sea of divine light to a range of hundreds of miles. To sum up, Chen Daoxuan's cultivation speed is several times faster than that of Shinjue, a real person, and from beginning to end, Chen Daoxian does not need to use any spiritual medicine to restore consciousness. He just needs to recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic silently once every time when his consciousness is exhausted. Know the sea. Apart from 30 stardust and golden scriptures, there are only clumps of light left. These light groups were all learned by Chen Daoxian and the 2 generations. Among them, the things that he has learned in this life are the most complicated, including exercises, spells, sword tactics, inheritance of utensils, inheritance of alchemy, inheritance of talismans, and so on. In these light clusters, there are 36 new light groups, and these 36 light groups are faintly surrounded together, forming a huge sphere, which is particularly conspicuous in Chen Daoxuan's Sea of Consciousness. These 36 light clusters are exactly the 36 first-order space sword tactics that Chen Daoxian learned in the Wangxinghai underwater world. Look at the 36 space sword tactics in the Sea of Knowledge. Chen Daoxian slammed the 30 stardust together without hesitation, and the next moment, Chen Daoxian entered the epiphany again. Chapter 231. As the 30 stardust in the Sea of Consciousness merged into one, countless fragmentary perceptions about space-type sword intent flooded into my heart. Rapid, instant shadow, wave. Various spatial perceptions are constantly emerging in the Sea of Consciousness. Chen Daoxian is like a hungry traveler in the desert, greedily absorbing these fragmentary perceptions and piecing them together little by little. Soon, Chen Daoxuan's comprehension of space sword intent is getting deeper and deeper, and he is only one step away from stepping into the first level of space sword intent. But obviously the complete spatial sword intent is not so easy to comprehend. At the moment when Chen Daoxuan's success was on the verge of failure, 36 light clusters in the Sea of Knowledge burst out with bright rays of light. Next second, 36 light clusters shattered collectively, turned into torrents of light and slowly merged together. At this time, Chen Daoxuan's comprehension of space sword intent suddenly went up a level. As more and more insights about the spatial sword intent came to his mind, Chen Daoxian unswervingly stepped towards the threshold of the spatial sword intent. Boom! No, the sea. 36 light clusters were completely merged into one. In the Sea of Dantian Qi, an invisible wave spread out in the whole Sea of Dantian Qi. Chen Daoxian, who had comprehended the Siyu sword intent once, understood that this was his performance after comprehending the sword intent. Success! Chen Daoxian suddenly opened his eyes with ecstasy in his eyes. He didn't expect that he had been working so hard for so long before he realized the branch of the sword intent of Water Xing, the sword intent of Siyu. However, this time, it took him less than a month before and after to fully understand the spatial sword intent. The difference is so huge that it is hard to put into words. Chen Daoxian knew that it wasn't his kendo talent that made rapid progress. The reason why he made such great progress was entirely due to the help of the stardust of perception that he breathed out after the golden scriptures absorbed the chi of chaos and the unknown inheritance trial in the underwater world of Wangxinghai. Which of the two is missing? Chen Daoxian didn't even think about comprehending the space sword intent in such a short period of time. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan's heart was filled with joy. Perhaps, the real demon world is my chance to truly rise. Chen Daoxian felt the intangible and intangible space sword intent of the Sea of Qi, and said excitedly. No matter what kind of sword intent, the first layer of sword intent is invisible. The division of sword intent has nothing to do with the type. But power is related to the type of sword intent. Just like Chen Daoxuan's Silk Rain sword intent, although it is not good at single attack, it can exert unexpected power in group attack. The same is true for other sword intents, each with their own advantages and disadvantages. It is difficult to generalize which is stronger and which is weaker. But in general, with the same kendo realm, the complete 5-element sword intent is stronger than the branched sword intent. For example, the complete sword intent of the water movement, the power is more than 30% stronger than the sword intent of Siyu. Not to mention the Jin Xing sword intent and the Fire Xing sword intent, which are best at attacking. The power of these two 5-element sword intent is about 50% stronger than that of the water element sword intent, and it is more than twice as powerful as the branched sword intent of the Siyu sword intent. As for the even better time and space sword intent, power is far stronger than the 5-element sword intent. Generally speaking, the space sword intent of the first-level realm is comparable to the 5-element sword intent of the second-level realm, which can be said to be very exaggerated. This is also the reason why the Hall Master of Jinhai Hall is only in the middle stage of nascent soul, but his strength is much stronger than that of the great monks in the later stage of nascent soul. In terms of realm, the Hall Master of Jinhai Palace took too much advantage. Although Chen Daoxian has only just realized the spatial sword intent, But he could clearly feel that the space sword intent, which is only in the first realm, is stronger than the Siyu sword intent, which is not far from the third realm. At least in single attack is much stronger. In the courtyard of Lingfu, Chen Daoxian stretched out a finger. At the fingertips, an invisible wave rippled. If there are monks who are proficient in the way of space standing here, they can find that this wave is not the wave after the air is distorted, but the wave of space. Now, the space is like a pool of water, slowly fluctuating under the stirring of Chen Daoxuan's finger. During the Battle of the Corpse Tide in Sangzhou, the Hall Master of Jinhai Palace pointed out that the spatial fluctuations escaped for hundreds of miles. This is the method used. Seeing the spatial fluctuation of his fingertips, Chen Daoxian had a look of joy on his face. Although he has only reached the first realm of space sword intent, he can also disturb space. Of course. Compared with the realm where the Hall Master of Jinhai Hall pointed and the spatial fluctuations swept hundreds of miles, the two were not at the same level. But at least, Chen Daoxian has uncovered the mystery of space sword intent. In the future, with the increase in the number of epiphanies, he will one day reach or even surpass the realm of the Hall Master of Jinhai Palace. Think of this. Chen Daoxian spit out. A flying sword swiftly came out of his mouth. It was his birth sword, Qingying. The third-order mid-grade Qingying sword is full of spirituality. As soon as he flew out of the Sea of Qi in Dantian, he happily danced around Chen Daoxian. Chen Daoxian caressed the Qingying sword lightly, his face full of joy, and said, "Let's use you to try my new understanding of the space sword intent." The words fall. Chen Jingjian let out a light cry, as if responding to Chen Daoxian. With the injection of real yuan, the Qingying sword suddenly erupted with a sword glow that was about 3 feet long. Of course, this is just the result of Chen Daoxuan's intentional control of his true essence in order to test the spatial sword intent. Otherwise, go all out. Qingying sword can now burst into a sword beam that is about 100 meters long, which is not inferior to Zhou Mubai back then. Although the sword light of the Qingying sword is only 3 feet, you will find it if you look closely. In addition to the sword glow of Qingying sword, there is a layer of invisible fluctuations, and under this layer of fluctuations, the space is distorted by Chen Daoxuan's flying sword. Space sword intent is really powerful. The ordinary flying sword, let alone 100 feet, even if it is hundreds of thousands of meters, it is impossible to change the space, but after comprehending the space sword intent, it is so easy to distort the space. Chen Daoxian muttered when he saw the scene in front of him. But obviously, this is not all the power of space sword intent. I saw Chen Daoxuan's consciousness move, and Feijian slashed towards the rockery group in the courtyard. However, before Feijian flew to the rockery group, he suddenly disappeared in place. The next moment, Feijian suddenly appeared in front of the rockery group, directly penetrating the mountain. Now, if there are monks with a cultivation level above Jindan who are present and observe carefully, they will find out. During the process of the flying sword running through the mountain, the sword glow and the sword body did not have the slightest contact with the rockery. Instead, relying on the spatial fluctuations outside the Jianmong, the space where the rockery is located is torn apart, thereby penetrating the mountain. Chen Daoxian did not know where is the power limit of this kind of space attack, but he knows that it is definitely much stronger than Siyu Jianyi's sword transformation Starlight. As for how strong, Chen Daoxian was also a little uncertain at this moment. Because there is really no suitable opponent to let him cut a sword. 3 days later, Chen Daoxian took the 7 high-end storage bags handed by Chen Daolian. Hanging 7 high-end storage bags around his waist, Chen Daoxuan's face was full of embarrassment. Because he looks kind of funny now. In these 7 high-end storage bags, each storage bag is filled with nearly 50 million spirit stones, and the storage bags are filled to the brim. Thanks to the opening of trade between Guang'an Prefecture and Bishu Prefecture. Otherwise, storage bags of this level could not be bought in the original Guang'an Prefecture. Okay, stop laughing. Seeing Chen Daolian covering her mouth and snickering, Chen Daoxian immediately said with a dark face. Heard. Chen Daoyan quickly restrained her smile, but the look of her holding back a smile made Chen Daoxian even more speechless. This trip to Taizhou, when I'm not here, you have to worry more about the family, you know? Understood, young patriarch. Hearing Chen Daoxuan's order to get down to business, Chen Daoyan restrained her smile and said sternly. Okay. Chen Daoxian nodded, and in the next second, he turned into a light and disappeared in front of Chen Daoyan. As a neighboring state of Zhangzhou, Taizhou is about hundreds of thousands of miles away from Guang'an Prefecture. With Chen Daoxuan's evasion speed, he can reach it in a few days by flying at full speed. This is also the reason why Chen Daoxian insisted on going alone. Otherwise, with the Chen family, you will either drive the spirit boat with great fanfare, or your speed will be greatly hindered. It's better to go alone as a loose cultivator. A loose cultivator with a third-level cultivation base in the foundation establishment period enters the Taizhou boundary and will not cause any attention. Although Chen Daoxian became famous in the battle to quell the corpse tide in Zhangzhou. But in Zhangzhou, there are not many monks who have actually met Chen Daoxian. Not to mention the Taizhou monks. After entering the Taizhou boundary, Chen Daoxian is basically a passerby. As long as he does not actively reveal his identity, he will basically not attract any attention. Wanqing Hainan Sea area where Taizhou and Zhangzhou meet. A spirit boat was flying towards the boundary between Taizhou and Zhangzhou at high speed. Judging from its direction, it should be the direction of Jingzhou. In the sky. Chen Daoxian watched Lingzhou fly towards him with a vigilant look on his face. Although there are fewer and fewer incidents of killing comrades in Wanqinghai. But that doesn't mean there isn't. In fact, many acts of intercepting fellows were not intentional, but improvised. Especially now, with 7 high-end storage bags hanging from Chen Daoxuan's waist, he almost had the words, "Come and grab me," engraved on his face. Really? Lingzhou slowly stopped in front of Chen Daoxian. A young man flew out of the spirit boat. This man's face is like a crown of jade, and looking at his face, he is actually a bit more handsome than Chen Daoxian. The young monk was 7 feet tall with nothing at his waist. Obviously, this must be a child of a certain family, and even the storage bag is helped by the servant. Fellow Daoist, it's your courtesy. Seeing Chen Daoxian, the young cultivator bowed his hands to him with a look of joy. Did you dare to ask your friend to attend the sermon of true monarch Yuanchen? I heard Jinjuan Yuanchen. Chen Daoxuan's mind immediately flashed the message of this true monarch Yuaning. Speak up. True monarch Yuanchen is very famous. He is one of the loose cultivator Yuanian cultivators who have risen from the battlefield of Izumo in the last 400 years. Yuanchen Jinjuan was originally a Taizhou cultivator, but since he broke through the Yuanian period, he has been ostracized by the Taizhou Yuanian family. Yuanchen Jinjuan knew that the opponent was powerful and did not want to argue with the opponent. Therefore, a fairy city was built at the junction of Taizhou and Zhangzhou, named Yuanchen Xianqing. Since this is a fairy city built by the true lord of the scattered cultivators, and it is located at the junction of Taizhou, Zhangzhou and Jingzhou, Yuanchen Xianqing has become the favorite fairy city of the scattered cultivators. After 200 years of development, unknowingly, Yuanchen Immortal City has actually become the largest immortal city in Taizhou, Jingzhou, and Zhangzhou. At least in terms of the scale of resident monks, it is the largest immortal city. According to the statistics, Yuanchen Xianqing has tens of millions of resident monks, which is the most among the 3 states. Compared with Chen's Guanhai Xianqing, it is a bigger market. Of course. In addition to the identity of Yuanchen Jinjuan as a loose cultivator, there is another most important reason for Yuanchen Xianqing to develop to its current scale, that is, Yuanchen Jinjuan is extremely good at business. Or, Yuanchen Jinjuan is very good at using his identity as Yuanying Jinjuan. Generally speaking, after the monks cultivated to the nascent soul stage, which one is not the top, the eyes are higher than the top, and they simply disdain to communicate with ordinary low-level monks. But Jinjuan Yuanchen is different. He is not only willing to help low-level monks, but also occasionally explains the way of cultivation in Yuanchen Xianqing for free. To know For loose cultivators, in addition to the lack of cultivation resources, there is also an important shortcoming, that is, no one teaches. Basically, the practice of loose cultivators all rely on their own exploration. How to build a foundation? What should I be aware of? How to open up Zifu, and what skills? How to get over the Golden Core Thunder Tribulation? Etc. Loose cultivators don't know anything about it. The vast majority of people in loose cultivation often rely on one or two low-level exercises to enter the path of cultivation, and then on the way to cultivation, whether it is resources or inheritance, they all have to rely on themselves. Other than that, no one can help them. At this time, a great master of nascent soul is willing to explain the cultivation way to these monks from time to time in a fairy city. It is conceivable that how many monks will be crazy about it. Not only loose cultivators, but even some family cultivators could not resist this temptation. Just like Qindao Xian. After hearing the young monk's words, his eyes flashed. Obviously, he was also moved. Although Qindao Xian has practiced so far, there is no shortage of resources or inheritance. But only one thing, he is very lacking. That is, no one teaches. In this respect, he is no different from Wan Xinghai's thousands of loose cultivators. It's not just him. A genius sword cultivator like Zhou Mubai was basically in a state of no one to teach him. At their level, to a certain extent, the help of the family to them is actually not that great. Especially the Zhou family's help to Zhou Mubai. At Zhou Mubai's level, it's not so much that the family is helping him, but that he is giving back to the family. Actually, if it weren't for the drag of the Zhou family and Zhou Mubai's talent, if he went to the battlefield of Izumo, maybe he would have a better future. But neither Zhou Mubai nor Qindao Xian chose to abandon the family. This is also the reason why family monks are more united than sect monks. Many sect monks. After the cultivation base reaches nascent soul or even higher, many will choose to go out to travel. In fact, it is said to be traveling, but in fact, they are basically in a state of being separated from the sect. For example, the sect is in crisis. Can the cultivators who traveled really come back to save the sect? Bullshit. The world of immortals is so vast, the ghost knows that it will take a few years or more for them to get back. After a few years, if the sect can't stop it, it will be destroyed. Chapter 232. Qindao Xian looked at the young cultivator who only established the foundation, his mind moved slightly, and he cupped his hands and said, "Exactly." "Great." The young cultivator said politely again, "I don't know if I can invite fellow Taoists to board the boat for a chat." So, disturbed. The words fall. The two of them joined the spirit boat together. The spirit boat was extravagant and extravagant. In addition to a group of foundation-building cultivators who were responsible for guarding it, there were more than a dozen beautiful maids waiting on it. Qindao Xian entered the cabin of the spirit ship, as if he was in the village of his daughter, which made him frown. The young cultivator seemed to see Qindao Xian's discomfort, waved his hand at the maid at random, and said with a smile, "This is a hobby, which will make friends laugh." Qindao Xian nodded slightly and did not speak. "Wait until the maid will serve the spirit tea." The young monk smiled and said, "Introduce myself. I am Ji Yanzhao from the Ji family in Jingzhou. I don't know if your friend is from Cangzhou?" Cangzhou Chen family cultivator, Qindao Xian, heard. Ji Yanzhao pondered for a moment, and seemed to have never heard the name of the Chen family in Cangzhou. Or, there are no famous families in Cangzhou at all. As for the Zifu family, they can still mix in Cangzhou, but in other states, it's not enough to watch. Among the Wangxinghai states, with the exception of Cangzhou, the families below the Golden Core are not considered to be the cultivators at all. At this point, Cangzhou cultivator is also clear in his heart. After experiencing two major disasters in succession, the rebellion of gods and the battle of Zenangwen, Cangzhou has too many high-level monks and potential monks, and they have been exhausted. So much so that Cangzhou cultivators were despised by cultivators from other Wangxinghai states. Despite his contempt in his heart, Ji Yanzhao didn't show any contempt on his face. Instead, he said sincerely, "It turns out that he is a fellow Taoist from the Qin family, so polite." Ji Daoyu is polite. Chen Daoxian picked up the spirit tea on the table, took a sip, and then asked, "I don't know if Ji Daoyu invited you, why?" "Oh," Ji Yanzhao put down the spirit tea in his hand and said with a smile, "Naturally, it is to participate in the sermons of Yuanqing Jinjuan with fellow Taoists." To be honest, the sermons of Yuanqing Taoist are open to the monks of Yuanqing Xianqing free of charge. If the monks from other states want to participate, they must pay. Among them, the Zhangzhou monks who are closest to Yuanqing Xianqing paid the least. "So, fellow Daoist Ji wants to go with me and pretend to be a Zhangzhou cultivator?" Chen Daoxian had a faint smile on his face. Cough cough, a look of embarrassment flashed across Ji Yanzhao's handsome face, and he said, "I attended the sermon of true monarch Yuanqing with my friends from Zhangzhou, how can it be considered an impersonation?" Chen Daoxian thought for a moment, then nodded and said, "Okay, I can promise you. Friend Daoist is really refreshing. When I saw Daoist friend's face, I knew that friend was Jigong." Chen Daoxian waved his hands again and again, interrupted his flattery, and said, "It's just that this can't be done in vain." "Ah." Ji Yanzhao stopped immediately, smiled awkwardly, and cupped his hands. "I don't know what your friend wants. Your request is very simple. Can you tell me about Jinjuan Yuanqing's sermon in detail? Hear this request." Ji Yanzhao breathed a sigh of relief, then smiled and said, "It turns out that this is the first time you have participated in Jinjuan Yuanqing's sermon." Chen Daoxian nodded calmly. The date of Yuanqing Zhenjin's sermon is not fixed. Except for the monks who have lived in Yuanqing Xianqing for a long time, few outsiders know the date of the other's sermon immediately. But every 10 years, Jinjuan Yuanqing would preach for 3 days. This is the only fixed preaching time for Yuanqing Jinjuan. But this sermon is obviously not a fixed sermon time. The cultivator of the Ji family in Jingzhou in front of him must have his own information channel in Yuanqing Xianqing. From this point, we can see the difference between the old big family and the new family like the Qin family. In addition to personal connections, in terms of information acquisition, the Qin family has very little information from the outside world except for the 1/3 of their own land. Not to mention Taizhou and Jingzhou. Even in Zhangzhou, if it wasn't for the establishment of the Zhangzhou Business Alliance, Qin Daolin gradually established his own intelligence channels in various provinces, and the Qin family was in a state of smearing Zhangzhou. Of course, the current Qin family has no time to take care of other states outside Zhangzhou. If it wasn't for the need to buy blood crystals this time, he would not have gone to Taizhou at all. Chen Daoxian is not short of cultivation resources, so there is no need to go to other people's sites to mess around. This is basically the consensus of the various immortal clans. Unless they were immortal cultivators with similar relationships, they would not easily send high-level cultivators to each other's territory to avoid misunderstandings. After all, the cultivator's might is attributed to himself. A high-level cultivator wandering around on other people's territory can easily arouse the hostility of others. Time passed little by little in Ji Yanzhao's introduction. In less than a few hours, Yuanqing Xianqing was faintly in sight. As Yuanqing Immortal City is approaching, Chen Daoxian found that the number of escaping lights and immortal boats in the sky suddenly increased sharply. Compared with the rare sight of the spirit boats in the immortal cities of Zhangzhou, the immortal boats in Yuanqing Xianqing can be said to cover the sky and the sun. However, it has not waited for the immortal boat to approach Yuanqing Xianqing. The cultivator riding the immortal boat performed the Meson technique in advance, put the immortal boat into the palm of his hand, put it into the cuff, and then flew towards Yuanqing Immortal City with the light of escape. Looking very far, Chen Daoxian discovered that this Yuanqing Immortal City was indeed the same as the rumored one, a floating immortal city. Not only that, after comprehending the space sword intent, he discovered from a distance that this immortal city was actually in 2 different spaces from the outside world. Dong Tian. Chen Daoxian was surprised. Yes, it's Dong Tian. Beside him, Ji Yanzha's voice came, "It's amazing, a loose cultivator, it took only 200 years to build such a majestic fairy city." Chen Daoxian nodded, "With the background of a loose cultivator, wouldn't it be even more powerful to be able to advance to the nascent soul stage in just over 200 years of cultivation?" Different, Ji Yanzhao shook his head, "A scattered cultivator is in the battlefield of Izumo. As long as he has outstanding military exploits and talent, he will definitely improve his cultivation base rapidly, but a high cultivation base does not mean that he can create a foundation in Wanxinghai." Chen Daoxian tasted these words carefully, and found that what the other party said was not without reason. In Wanxinghai, if you are not strong, you must have a foundation. Although Yuanying monks are strong, they still have to abide by the rules of Qianyuan Zhenzong. Otherwise, everyone will wantonly plunder, and whoever is stronger must have more resources. But Wanxinghai is not a place without legal rules, this rule obviously does not apply. Back then, the real person of Shinjue was also strong, so why would he have no resources to cultivate? It was the rules of Qianyuan Zhenzong that limited him. Actually, Qianyuan Jianzong's rules are extremely unreasonable for many monks, but it protects the low-level monks at the bottom. Otherwise, everyone would wantonly kill and loot each other, and it would definitely be the low-level monks who would suffer in the end. When a cultivator in the qi refining period faces a foundation-building cultivator, who can resist? "Let's go, fellow Daoist Chen, let's go down." On the spirit boat. The group flew down, and the spirit boat slowly became smaller, and was finally taken into the bag by Ji Yanzhao. It is almost the same as entering Qianyuan Zhenzong. Everyone entered Yuanshan Xianqing through a space. Enter the interior of the fairy city. Everyone only felt that they had come to a real immortal cave. It is full of spiritual energy, far more exaggerated than the spiritual energy of the third-order spiritual veins on Shuanghu Island. The effect of Dongshan's blockade of spiritual energy is more powerful than that of the gathering spirit formation. Of course. Ji Yanzhao raised his brows and agreed. Everyone looked around in the air for a moment, and Ji Yanzhao stretched out his hand and said, "Fellow Daoist, look, there is the dojo where true monarch Yuanshan preaches." Chen Daoxian looked in the direction of his finger. Into the eye. A huge floating island appeared in front of the two of them. Above the floating island, a streak of light flew out of Yuanshan Immortal City and landed on the floating Immortal Island. It was spectacular. Chen Daoxian looked at the scene in front of him, and only felt that the cave in front of him was not inferior to the universe of the Qianyuan Sword Sect's Immortal Palace. It is hard to imagine that such a heavenly paradise was actually built by a loose cultivator in just 200 years. Chen Daoxian is not a loose cultivator who doesn't understand anything. He knows that every grass and tree here is accumulated with resources. Large-scale strategic transport ships that are rarely seen in the outside world can be seen everywhere in Yuanshan Xianqing. Basically, Yuanshan Xianqing relies on this large transport ship to maintain the flow of materials. Although Chen Daoxian didn't know how many such large transport ships there were in Yuanshan Xianqing, there were more than Sangzhou Merchant Alliance's transport ships. Floating Fairy Island. Ji Yanzhao paid the spiritual stone for listening to the sermon, and thanked the monk who collected the fee with a smile on his face. "Wait until the crowd goes away," Ji Yanzhao said happily. "With Brother Chen, we have a total of 26 cultivators, one first-class seat with 10,000 spirit stones, a total of 260,000 spirit stones, oh." After calculating the account, Ji Yanzhao felt a pain in the flesh. "This is still borrowing your identity as a Sangzhou cultivator, Brother Chen, otherwise the price will be higher." Saying that, he shook his head. "See." Chen Daoxian was rather puzzled, and said curiously, "I'm afraid your spirit boat, Brother Ji, has more than 1 million spirit stones, right? How can you care about the mere 200,000 spirit stones?" "A mere 200,000 spirit stones?" Hearing this, Ji Yanzhao looked at Chen Daoxian with a strange look, and found that the other side looked as usual, and he couldn't help but secretly speculate whether this person had lost his mind or not. "Ahem, Brother Chen, keep your voice down. We're just foundation-building cultivators. People will laugh at you if you talk like that. Ji Yanzhao gently pulled Chen Daoxuan's sleeve. Heard. Chen Daoxian reacted immediately. His current cultivation base is only 3 layers, but the arrogance in his words, Jin Dan cultivator's heart twitches when he hears it. It seems that the Chen family is really too rich. Seeing that no one around heard the conversation between the two, Ji Yanzhao breathed a sigh of relief, and he whispered, Brother Chen doesn't know, the spirit boat I use is borrowed from the family, not mine. But the 260,000 spirit stones that I heard, I paid for myself, so naturally the two should not be confused. Hearing this explanation, Chen Daoxian nodded in understanding. It seems that this is the normal appearance of a family member. Perhaps the Chen family on Shuanghu Island is not as strong as the Ji family, but he is the helm of the Chen family, and the resources he can mobilize are naturally not comparable to a foundation-building cultivator of the Ji family. Actually, as a foundation-building cultivator of the Ji family, Ji Yanzhao was able to use more than 200,000 spiritual stones to listen to the sermon, and he could already see the profound heritage of the Ji family. If it is replaced by the Chen family, can any foundation-building cultivator use 200,000 spirit stones? There is no problem. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxian looked a little embarrassed again. Ji Yanzhao didn't know what Chen Daoxian was thinking. Seeing his embarrassed expression, he thought he had reacted, and felt ashamed for his shameless words just now. As a family member who has received an elite education, Ji Yanzhao is naturally not reckless in his life. He understands the principle of accepting it as soon as possible. He quickly changed the subject and said, Brother Chen, look, that is our position. Ji Yanzhao pointed to a Wenyu futon not far away. Yuanchen Jinjuan preached on a high platform on the floating immortal island. The platform is now empty. Around the high platform, there are circles of futons made by Wenyu. These futons are the seats for monks to listen to. Among them, the seats closest to the high platform are not sold to the outside world, but are given away. The further the rest of the seats are, the more the price goes down. Look around. The huge floating immortal island is all this kind of warm jade futon. One can imagine how spectacular the scene will be when Yuanchen Jinjuan starts to preach. Seeing that most of these were empty Wenyu futons, Chen Daoxian couldn't help but stunned. Brother Ji, do you know when the sermon will start? It should be 7 days later. Hearing this, Chen Daoxian nodded and walked towards his position silently. The 26 seats Ji Yanzhao purchased were all first-class seats. Class A seats are the best group of seats except for non-external sales, with a total of 10,000 seats. Chen Daoxian and others had better luck and just bought it. Seeing these seats on floating immortal island, Chen Daoxian vaguely knew why Yuanchen Immortal City was able to develop. Compared with other nascent soul true monarchs, the deepest impression of this true monarch Yuanchen on him is that he doesn't hold it up, which, as the saying goes, is down to earth. Chen Daoxian had seen so many infant true monarchs in Qianyuan Jianzong, and they even looked at the Zifu monks in Cangzhou with indifference, let alone these foundation-building and even qi-refining monks on the immortal island now. Normally, the cultivators in the qi-refining stage were not even qualified to meet the Yuanian cultivators, but Yuanchen Jinjuan broke this unspoken rule, not only willing to meet the low-level cultivators, but even preaching for them in person. As such, how can a low-level monk not be grateful to Dade? How can Yuanchen Xianqing not be prosperous? Floating Fairy Island. After Chen Daoxian and his party sat down, more and more monks flew to the immortal island. The originally vacant Wenyu futon gradually became packed. Although the immortal island is full of monks, it is boundless at a glance, at least tens of millions. But the audience was silent, and no one was making a noise. Even the cultivators even changed their breathing to internal breathing. In the blink of an eye, 7 days have passed. As the time for Jinjuan Yuanchen's sermons got closer and closer, more than a dozen figures flew over the immortal island, and flew straight towards the first-class seats. Chen Daoxian realized that they were flying towards Ji Yanzhao and the others when the other party lowered the escape light. This group of people is led by a cultivator in the early period of Zifu. Although his face is handsome, his indifferent expression can easily make outsiders feel disgusted with him. It was not his appearance that attracted Chen Daoxuan's attention, but his forehead, which actually had a divine pattern exactly the same as Yi Wudeo's. The tester of Wan Xinghai inheritance was thinking. Clap. A storage bag was thrown over by a servant beside him. Surprisingly, the servant was actually a late-stage cultivator of the Purple Mansion. Here is 1,000,000 spirit stones, I will buy you 13 seats. It was the first time that Ji Yanzhao had been smashed with spirit stones like this since he was a child, but he could see that the cultivators in front of him were not only powerful but also had complex backgrounds. In addition, he was away from home and didn't want to cause trouble, so he picked up the spiritual stone on the ground and flipped it upside down, then turned around and said, Xiaolan, give your seats to the seniors. Yes. The foundation building maid named Xiaolan turned pale and nodded immediately. The rest of the maids did not dare to resist, and stood up one by one with a lonely look. Soon, 12 seats were vacated, and the last one remained. Seeing this, Ji Yanzhao said with an ugly face, Senior, I am a disciple of the Ji family in Jingzhou, and these are my Ji family cultivators. The Ji family. The leading young cultivator nodded, then looked at Chen Daoxian, and said in a commanding tone, You, get out of the way. Chapter 233. Floating Fairy Island. The dojo where he preached was packed and quiet. But in the first-class seat area, there are two parties facing each other. Seeing that Chen Daoxian was indifferent, the young cultivator with the pattern frowned slightly. The servant of the Z mansion on the side saw that the foundation building cultivator in front of him was ignoring the attitude of his master, and his face turned black in front of everyone. Saying that, he opened his palms and wanted to grab Chen Daoxuan's Tianling Gai. But Chen Daoxian closed his eyes, as if the cultivator of the Purple House period in front of him did not attack him. 7th, step back. Just when the palm of the servant of the Z mansion was 3 feet away from the top of Chen Daoxuan's head, the young cultivator with a divine mark on his forehead abruptly stopped his movements. Yes, son. The servant of the Zifu named Lao Qi stopped quickly, turned around and bowed, and retreated behind the young monk. Immediately, the young cultivator named a foundation-building cultivator from his entourage and said, Go to Yuanshan Xiancheng and wait for us first. Yes. The named cultivator looked desolate, but he obediently followed behind the handmaiden of the Ji family and left the place. So far, a dispute has disappeared. Shi Shiran, a young cultivator with a divine pattern, sat down on the futon beside Chen Daoxian, and said, The Daoist is very brave. Chen Daoxian raised his eyelids, glanced at him, then closed his eyes and did not speak. Seeing that Chen Daoxian was still ignoring him, the young cultivator's expression froze, then he stopped talking, and silently waited for the start of the sermon. After a few hours, a figure suddenly appeared on the high platform of the dojo. This person is wearing a blue Taoist robe, has long silver hair in a bun, and has a ruddy complexion. Judging from his kind eyebrows and kind eyes, and his immortal appearance, he looks like a person in the middle of an immortal. It is Yuanshan Zhenjuan. True monarch Yuanshan was tall and tall, with a height of 2 meters, far exceeding the height of an ordinary cultivator. True monarch Yuanshan's face was facing where Chen Daoxian was sitting. Feeling the casual glance of Yuanying Zhenjuan, Chen Daoxian only felt an invisible pressure pressing on him. After a little bit of perception, he found that the people around him were just like him, all of their bodies were tense. Obviously, everyone felt a lot of pressure. Is this the Yuanying monk? Too horrible. Chen Daoxian held his breath and said secretly. Seeing that the entire dojo was silent, a voice resembling a grand bell suddenly sounded. It was Zhenjuan Yuanshan's sermon. All of you are monks, but you all know the way of cultivation. What exactly is cultivation? Is it longevity? Is it the mighty force that destroys the sky and destroys the earth? True monarch Yuanshan asked 3 questions in a row. Immediately, everyone's hearts were attracted. Since Chen Daoxian stepped into the fairyland under the guidance of Qin Xianhe, although he occasionally had similar doubts during his practice, he never got the answer. All along, he has been ignorant. When others cultivate qi, he also cultivates qi, and when others build foundations, he also builds foundations. Chen Daoxian didn't actually understand the essence of cultivation. In other words, most of the loose cultivators don't know much about it. Although Chen Daoxian is not a loose cultivator, in addition to inheriting resources, he is not much different from a loose cultivator in terms of cognition of the way of cultivation, and is still very lacking. To some extent. The three questions raised by Xinjuan Yuanchen are more like questions about the nature of cultivation. Seeing that everyone was attracted, Xinjuan Yuanchen said slowly, "You must have seen such a sentence from the various exercises of practice on the first day of stepping into the immortal path. The way of practice is nothing more than self-cultivation inside and outside combined avenue. So, what is the self and what is the Tao? In my humble opinion, the cultivation of one's own body lies in the three jewels, essence, qi, and spirit." True monarch Yuanchen paused. In simple terms, refining the physical body is a strong essence, refining the spiritual energy is nourishing the energy, and strengthening the spiritual consciousness is the concentration. Refinement of qi, refinement of spirit. Under the sermon of Xinjuan Yuanchen, one's own practice can be divided into three aspects: spirit, energy, and spirit, but these three aspects do not exist independently, but are interdependent. Such as the way of refining qi, it can temper the body and strengthen the consciousness. The way of refining the body can also nourish the qi and concentrate the mind. Although Xinjuan Yuanchen did not talk about the way of practicing spiritual consciousness, Chen Daoxian knew that there was such a way of practice in the world. The Sea of Divine Light is a typical spiritual practice method. Soul conditioning divine light is nothing more than a magical power attached to the method of divine consciousness cultivation, the Sea of Divine Light. On the high platform, Yuanchen Xinjuan was still preaching without stopping, and everyone was fascinated by it. Following his sermon, the floating immortal island actually began to have a vision. In the void, the illusory golden lotus blossoms gradually bloom. But at this moment, everyone has no intention to pay attention to the vision, and everyone's mind is attracted by true monarch Yuanchen. At the beginning, the cultivators in the outermost qi refining period could still understand what true monarch Yuanchen said, but the more they went on, the more illusory they felt, and they didn't know what to say. In desperation, these qi-refining cultivators had to force themselves to remember, but the strange thing was that no matter how hard they forced themselves, they just couldn't remember, and it was amazing. What's even more strange is that, as the words of true monarch Yuanchen became more and more profound, although these qi-refining cultivators couldn't understand them, they felt sick in their hearts and fainted. The experienced qi-refining cultivator did not dare to listen anymore, so he immediately got up from the Wenyu futon, bowed his hands to Xinjuan Yuanchen, and flew away. The qi-refining cultivator who came to listen to the Tao for the first time saw this, and quickly followed suit and left with the large army in embarrassment. Less than half a day. The monks who listened to the sermon on the floating immortal island decreased by 90%. Only the monks above the foundation establishment period were still mesmerized. On the high platform, true monarch Yuanchen continued with a smile, "So, cultivation and realm cannot be confused. Cultivation is to measure the degree of self-cultivation, and realm is to comprehend the depth of the Tao. Although the two cannot be confused, they are mutually dependent." Heard here. Chen Daoxian suddenly felt a sense of enlightenment. Speaking of which, he is a typical monk with low cultivation and high realm. In terms of cultivation, Chen Daoxian only has 3 levels of foundation building, but in terms of the realm of swordsmanship, he has comprehended 2 kinds of sword intent in a row, one of which is space sword intent, and the other is closer to the realm of triple star transformation. When an ordinary cultivator is building a foundation, let alone the realm of the 3rd level of sword intent, it is already a posture of heaven to comprehend a sword intent to the invisible realm. This shows how terrifying Chen Daoxuan's realm is among fellow cultivators who are cultivators. The Tao is ethereal and invisible, so the monks have to seek the things that inherit the Tao in order to understand the Tao. At this point, the cultivation world has a distinction between the way of magic and the way of swordsmanship. Inheriting Dao in art, hence the name Dao Shu, inheriting Dao in sword, hence the name Kendo, because the paths are different, but the same destination. Therefore, there is no need to envy the sword cultivator who chooses to follow the martial arts. Although the sword cultivator is powerful at the same level, it has the disadvantage of being easily broken. Although the martial arts monk is slightly weaker, but for a while, Jinjuan Yuanchen was actually stuck. He didn't seem to think of words to comfort the fellow practitioners, so he smiled slightly, skipped this topic, and continued to explain the avenue. The Dao that Jinjuan Yuanchen realized was similar to Chen Dao Xian, and it was also the way of water. However, Jinjuan Yuanchen is not a sword cultivator, but a martial arts cultivator. Just as Yuanchen Jinjuan said, although Qingdao Yushu's strength is slightly weaker than that of sword cultivators of the same realm, this weakness will become less obvious as the cultivator's cultivation realm increases. For example, when it comes to the cultivation of nascent soul, the gap between the martial arts cultivator and the sword cultivator is more reflected in the difference in the cultivation base and realm of the two sides, rather than the difference in the paths taken by the two sides. 3 days of preaching passed quickly. Everyone came back to their senses after Jinjuan Yuanchen left. Chen Dao Xian stood up and bowed respectfully in the direction of Yuanchen Zhenjin's departure. Only then did the body transform into an escape light and flew towards the outside of the immortal island. Behind! Ji Yanzhao shouted again and again, but Chen Dao Xian ignored it and left Yuanchen Xianqing. Fairy Island. The young cultivator who was born with the divine pattern watched Chen Dao Xian leave without saying a word for a long time. Beside him, the servant of Zifuki asked in a low voice, "Young master, do you want your subordinates to teach this person a lesson?" Heard. The young monk glanced at him and said coldly, "No need." The servants of the Z mansion did not know where to offend the Jiang family Tianjiao, and couldn't help but feel uneasy. Of course he didn't know that 3 days ago, if this Jiang Tianjiao had not stopped, his palm would have been cut off by Chen Daoxuan's space sword intent. Looking at the direction in which Chen Daoxian disappeared, Jiang Chenai frowned secretly and said in his heart, with such a sharp spatial sword intent, "Who is this person, not far away?" When Ji Yanzhao saw Chen Daoxian go straight away, he ignored him at all, and retracted his greeting right hand. Immediately, he saw Jiang Chenai and his party not far away. With a smile on his face immediately, he walked forward quickly, and cupped his hands. "Seniors, I am the Ji family of Jingzhou." Not finished. Jiang Chen ignored him at night, turned into a light, and flew away. When the other servants saw their master leave, they followed closely. When Ji Yanzhao saw this scene, the smile on his face gradually solidified. "Sir, let's go." After sticking his hot face against his cold twice in a row, Ji Yanzhao couldn't hide the chill in his heart any longer, and said coldly, "Leave Yuanchen Xianqing." Chen Daoxian, who had made a lot of money, no longer delayed, and flew straight towards Taizhou. Although Chen Daoxuan's cultivation base is only 3 layers, but his speed of escaping light is faster than that of an ordinary cultivator of Zifu. Especially after he comprehends the spatial sword intent, the speed of escape is even higher. Now his escaping speed is not far behind that of Zhou Mubai, who went to Lotus Island together. 2 days later, Chen Daoxian entered the boundary of Taizhou. Although there are no detailed statistics, roughly speaking, the number of monks in Taizhou is at least 10 times that of Zhangzhou. In other words, there are at least tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of monks in Taizhou. This shows the prosperity of Taizhou. Flying all the way from Shuanghu Island to the immortal city of Evernight, relying on escape light, even with Chen Daoxuan's extremely deep reserves of true yuan, he was still very tired. Approaching Evernight Immortal City, Chen Daoxian finally saw the bustling and solemn Evernight Immortal City. Compared with the Yuanchen Immortal City that I had a glimpse of a few days ago, the scale of the Evernight Immortal City does not seem to be able to catch up with the Yuanchen Immortal City. At least in terms of the size of the monks, the Immortal City of Evernight is no match for the other party. According to the information Chen Daoxian learned, The Evernight Immortal City usually has at most 10 million resident monks, far less than the terrifying scale of the tens of millions of monks in the Yuanshan Immortal City. But in terms of power, the Jiang family does not know how much bigger than Yuanshan Xianqing. Because what the Jiang family masters is far more than the immortal city of Evernight Immortal City. In Taizhou, all the immortal cities in the prefectures were dispatched by the Jiang family. Not only that, the Jiang family even has a terrifying control over these immortal cities, because almost all the commanders of the monk army guarding these immortal cities are from the Jiang family. If it weren't for the suppression of Qianyuan Jianzong on the top of his head. With the strength of the Jiang family, all the states around Taizhou can be brought under control in minutes. The cultivator cultivating the clone does not sacrifice as much as he wants. To sacrificial avatars requires cutting the sea of consciousness of the monks. According to the secret method of avatars in 4Jia, sacrificing avatars is essentially to divide the soul. It is necessary to inject part of the soul of the deity into the clone. Therefore, before the primordial spirit stage, a cultivator can only sacrifice one clone at most, and even if this clone falls, the cultivator can no longer sacrifice the second clone. Otherwise, the continuous cutting of the soul will cause irreversible damage to the source of the soul and affect the path of the cultivator. This is also the reason why Chen Daoxian chose the flesh and blood clone with the greatest potential. Otherwise, just to use the clone as cannon fodder, Chen Daoxian can choose a monk from the Chen family's military department and go to the real demon world instead of him. The next days, Chen Daoxian quietly secluded himself in the cave mansion in the immortal city of Yongye. He brought a total of 340 million spirit stones from the Chen family this time. At the price of one blood crystal of 100,000 spirit stones, he could buy a total of 3,400 blood crystals, plus his own one. 3,401 pieces. So many blood crystals are definitely enough to make a clone. Inside the rental cave, Chen Daoxian waved his hand to open the protective formation that came with Dongfu. Chen Daoxian, who was sitting on the Wenyu futon, patted the storage bag on his waist. Immediately, a pile of blood crystals appeared in front of him, counting down, there were a total of 200. Immediately, Chen Daoxian called out his birth sword, Feishua sword. He stretched out his right arm, rolled up the sleeve of his right arm, and then controlled the Feishua sword, slashing towards his right arm fiercely. Severe pain came. Chen Daoxian did not change his face, picked up a blood crystal in his left hand, and pressed it towards the wound rolled up like a baby's mouth. At this time, a miraculous scene happened. I saw that the blood crystal met Chen Daoxian's blood, melted directly, and then quickly melted into Chen Daoxian's wound. And his wound, with the integration of blood crystals, is also recovering quickly. Chen Daoxian was not surprised that the wound could recover quickly. Because he is a body-refining cultivator, although his physical body has not yet reached the level of being derived from flesh and blood, he can be reborn from a severed limb. But a quick recovery from the injury is a no-brainer. Not to mention that Chen Daoxian had practiced the body refinement technique. Even if the Foundation establishment cultivators had not practiced the body refinement technique, it would be a piece of cake to recover from this kind of injury with their physical strength. Just as Yuanshan Jinjuan said, the cultivation of cultivators' spirit, energy, and spirit is actually interdependent. Even a foundation-building cultivator who has not practiced bodybuilding exercises has a physical strength that is far from what a cultivator in the Qi cultivation stage can match. With the blood crystal into Chen Daoxian's body, his skin was flushed like a boiled prawn, and in addition, the temperature of his flesh was rising sharply. If a mortal approached him at this moment, I am afraid that he would be directly scalded to death by the high temperature emanating from his body. Despite this, Chen Daoxian's consciousness was still clear. Since he learned how to use blood crystals from Zhang Yu, this is the first time he has tried to use blood crystals to refine his body. Count carefully. Chen Daoxian has not practiced dragon python swallowing heaven since he entered the foundation building stage. It's not that the level of this exercise is too low, but that Chen Daoxian does not have the appropriate resources to practice this exercise. With the continuous improvement of his cultivation base, Chen Daoxian knew that in fact, it was not the high consumption of ordinary resources but the lack of physical training resources that restricted the high-level cultivators from practicing the body refinement exercises. For low-level monks, it is also possible to refine the body by eating lingmi. But for the foundation establishment cultivator, the low-level spiritual rice is useless, and the output of the high-level spiritual rice is too low, and it is not enough. In addition, the improvement of the cultivator's strength by the cultivation of the body training method is far from the improvement of the strength brought by the improvement of the cultivation base. Therefore, after successful foundation building, monks usually give up cultivating body exercises. Chen Daoxian is a typical example. He found that the improvement of his strength by cultivating the body training method was very small, especially after he established the foundation. The level of kendo increased greatly, which made him feel that body training was useless. As a sword cultivator, it is basically impossible for him to be reduced to the level of hand-to-hand combat with the enemy. In terms of defense, the physical defense of a body refiner is far from the defense of a spirit armor. But in the real demon world, Chen Daoxian saw a completely different picture. In the real world of demons, the human race all follow the way of body refinement, although their way of body refinement is far inferior to the way of cultivation in this world. But I have to say that the recovery ability of the body cultivator is really too strong. As long as you reach the cultivation level derived from flesh and blood, you can be reborn from a broken limb. If you achieve the cultivation level of rebirth from a drop of blood, wouldn't it be possible to be immortal? Close the room. Chen Daoxian's thoughts turned sharply and quickly calmed down. With the rerunning of Dragon Python Swallowing Heaven, the temperature of his body gradually decreased. At the same time, with the decrease in the body temperature, Chen Daoxian found that the strength of the body, which had not been improved for a long time, was slowly increasing. And the speed at which his fleshly body became stronger was far faster than when he ate lingmi. This blood crystal is worthy of 100,000 spirit stones, and the effect is many times stronger than that of lingmi. Chen Daoxian secretly said. In the secret room, Chen Daoxian's robe was thrown aside at will, and his streamlined muscles were hidden under the skin, making his naked upper body look extremely strong. An hour later, the red color on Chen Daoxian's body completely disappeared, and his body temperature returned to normal. He clenched his fist lightly, and suddenly, a crackling sound like fried beans echoed in the secret room. With just one blood crystal, the physical body is at least 10% stronger. Chen Daoxian looked at the blood crystals piled up in front of him with a shocked expression. At this speed, with up to 10 blood crystals, I can break the shackles of the flesh and reach the realm derived from flesh and blood. Think of this. Chen Daoxian's face was full of excitement. If it weren't for the hopeless improvement of the physical body, how could Chen Daoxian give up the opportunity to improve the physical cultivation? Even if the physical enhancement cannot bring much strength to the monk, it can at least increase the monk's ability to save his life. However, blood crystals are too precious to be used by ordinary monks. Continue. Chen Daoxian restrained the expression on his face, and cut his own skin with the flying sword again. Inside the secret room, Chen Daoxian used his flying sword to cut through his skin time and time again, and blood crystals melted into his body, and were digested by him running Dragon Python Swallowing Heaven. Because Chen Daoxian's realm is far higher than his qi refining and body refining cultivation. Therefore, there is no bottleneck at all for this improvement at present. Blood crystals are different from spirit rice, and there is no hidden danger of eating too much residual impurities to damage the body. Chen Daoxian found that it seems that as long as his realm can keep up, he can continue to strengthen. Finally, after Chen Daoxian fused the 9th blood crystal, his body ushered in a drastic change. Although this kind of change is not as violent as when Chen Daoxian built his foundation, the shock brought by the reorganization of flesh and blood is no less than the shock brought by the expansion of the sea of qi and the transformation of infuriating energy. Maybe Chen Daoxian's realm is too high, or maybe he himself has built a foundation once. This kind of reorganization of flesh and blood, after all, is a near miss. 3 full days. The reorganization of flesh and blood slowly stopped. Opening his eyes again, Chen Daoxian felt that everything in front of him had changed. Since this transformation was the transformation of the physical body, the first change he felt was the change in vision. For a long time, Chen Daoxian had never practiced the spiritual eye secret technique. But at this moment, Chen Daoxian discovered that his interpupillary distance could be adjusted at will like an eagle. By adjusting the interpupillary distance, Chen Daoxian found that the dust floating in the air in the secret room was as big as basketballs. When Chen Daoxian saw the scene in front of him, he immediately felt an unprecedented novelty. This feeling was the same as when he first observed the world with his divine sense. At this moment, an inexplicable insight rose in his heart. It turns out that the essence of a monk's practice is to recognize the Tao, and then transform himself through the Tao of cognition. In the process of transforming ourselves, we are getting closer and closer to the avenue, which is a complementary process. No wonder Zhenjuan Yuanchen would say that the 3 treasures of practice are interdependent. Although body training does not greatly improve strength, it can help cultivators to understand the Tao more clearly, and it is also helpful for cultivators to refine qi and spirit. Just after his physical body reached the cultivation base derived from flesh and blood, Chen Daoxian found that his understanding had actually improved. This feeling is so clear, just as he felt his comprehension had improved after he built the foundation. After becoming familiar with the changes of physical breakthrough, Chen Daoxian took a deep breath, and his eyes narrowed. Now, it's time to sacrifice the flesh and blood clone. As the name suggests, if a monk wants to use his own flesh and blood to sacrifice his flesh and blood, he needs to take a piece of flesh and blood from his own body. This is undoubtedly a process of self-harm. If the cultivator's body is not cultivated enough, it will cause great damage to the cultivator's body. But for Chen Daoxian, who has reached the derivation of flesh and blood, there is no such problem. I saw that he was holding the sword in his right hand, and Fijian's sword body was not only overflowing with spiritual light, but also a faint space ripple rippled around the sword body. Next moment, Chen Daoxian was ruthless, and slashed his left hand with a sword. Brush! Suddenly, a pain that penetrated deep into the bone marrow hit his consciousness. But the pain was blocked by him. As his left hand was cut off by him, countless granulation sprouts began to grow wildly at the fracture. In just a few breaths, a mass of palms slowly took shape, and then, on the palms, new skin tissue began to grow, covering the entire palm. In less than half a cup of tea, the new left hand has grown and is exactly the same as the previous one. This recovery ability is simply a monster. Chen Daoxian looked at his newly grown palm and muttered. Just amazed for a while. He picked up the left palm that he had cut off again. Looking at his broken left palm, Chen Daoxian couldn't help but wonder, if he waited for his physical cultivation to be higher and split him in half, would there be 2 himself? But then, he shook his head again. He knows that there is a high probability not, because his soul is still intact. For example, the palm that he cut off now, although it was cut from his left arm, but at the moment it is just a mass of flesh and blood without soul, it is impossible to grow into a human again. Next, Chen Daoxian must put a lot of blood crystals into this flesh and blood to provide it with the energy to condense the flesh, and finally put his soul into this clone. In this way, the flesh and blood avatar is considered a successful sacrifice. The process is generally not difficult. It's just that there is some pain in the process of dividing the soul, but Chen Daoxian is confident that he can hold it back. In the blink of an eye, a month has passed. With the input of 107 blood crystals, the left hand that Chen Daoxian cut off has long since recovered. At this moment, in front of Chen Daoxian, a huge meatball with a diameter of about 1 meter 5 floated quietly. Looking at the huge meatball in front of him, Chen Daoxian knew that the time to split his soul had come. Subsequently, he cut his own soul according to the secret method of Forjia. Since he is only in the foundation building stage, his soul is invisible and intangible, but it is reflected in the sea of consciousness, that is, a piece of his sea of consciousness has been cut off. As this sea of consciousness was cut off, the sea of consciousness of Chen Daoxuan's deity collapsed directly. The sea of consciousness that was originally 100 kilometers in diameter gradually became 90 kilometers, 80 kilometers, and 70 kilometers, and finally stopped when it reached 60 kilometers. Chapter 235. Chen Daoxian could not pay attention to the changes in the sea of consciousness. All his mind at the moment was attracted by the meat ball with a diameter of 1 meter 5 in front of him. After the blood-colored flesh ball merged into the sea of consciousness fragment, the red light suddenly became more intense. As the red light flickered, the next moment, the blood-colored flesh ball squirmed wildly. Chen Daoxian knew that this was a sign that the clone was about to take shape. He didn't dare to neglect, when all the remaining blood crystals were about to be thrown into the blood-colored flesh ball. With the integration of blood crystals, the speed of the blood-colored flesh creeping even more crazy. Chen Daoxian could clearly perceive that the energy fluctuations emanating from the blood-colored flesh ball in front of him made him faintly startled. Gradually, the crawling blood-colored flesh ball took on a human shape about 7 feet tall. And the face and torso of the humanoid became more and more clear. To the end, Chen Daoxian found that this new body looked exactly like him. This feeling, just amazing. Suspended in midair, the naked clone opened his eyes, looked at the deity in white robe, and touched his face subconsciously. His face was full of weird colors. Chen Daoxian didn't know how to describe this feeling of seeing himself, but he could only use the word wonderful to describe it. Although this clone is only in the qi refining period, its physical strength is almost comparable to the original, reaching the realm of flesh and blood. Chen Daoxian felt it carefully, and his face showed joy. After all, Chen Daoxian spent almost 200 blood crystals, or 20 million spirit stones, for this clone. This price is not too big. If it is replaced by a common magic weapon, he can buy a 4th-order middle grade or even stronger magic weapon. But now, he only got a clone comparable to the qi refining period. From the point of view of the combat power of the clone, Chen Daoxian undoubtedly lost blood. But the potential of the flesh and blood clone is not inferior to the deity, which makes Chen Daoxian feel worth it. How strong his deity potential is, others do not know, but Chen Daoxian himself knows it. Switching to the avatar of a magic weapon, it is impossible to keep up with his progress. Only the flesh and blood avatar that is in the same blood as him can keep up with the speed of the deity's progress. Chen Daoxian was in a good mood after the success of the avatar sacrifice. Open the door of the cave. Only then did Chen Daoxian really visit the first immortal city in Taizhou, the immortal city of Yongye. Compared with the immortal city in Sangzhou, the architectural style of Yongye Xiancheng is more inclined to black and dark colors. This color tone is also more in line with the solemn and calm cultivation atmosphere of Taizhou. On busy streets, Chen Daoxian wandered around casually, his eyes looking at the shops on both sides from time to time, trying to find some places worth learning from Guanhai Xiancheng. But after shopping for a whole day, Chen Daoxian found that it was impossible for Guanhai Xiancheng to develop to its current scale according to the model of Evernight Xiancheng. From Chen Daoxuan's eyes, the reason why the immortal city of the eternal night is so prosperous is that it relies entirely on the entire land of Taizhou to support this immortal city. Although the size of the monks in the Evernight immortal city is not comparable to that of the Yuanshan immortal city through Chen Daoxuan's pathway, its wealth far exceeds that of the Yuanshan immortal city. Although Yuanshan immortal city is also very prosperous, the various cultivation supplies it sells are not comparable to Yongye immortal city. In Eternal Night Immortal City, Chen Daoxian was able to buy a foundation pill that could only be bought at the Guang'an Prefecture Xiancheng auction house in a random elixir shop on the street. This surprised Chen very much. Although the foundation establishment pill is not a great elixir, let alone the immortal clan, it is not a precious elixir even for a newly rising family such as the Chen family on Shuanghu Island. But in the entire Zhangzhou medicine pill market, it is rare to see any medicine pill shop that sells it in the store. This means that in Taizhou, the foundation pill is not a precious resource at all, and it is in a situation of oversupply. Looking at the leopard, Taizhou's cultivation resources are much richer than Cangzhou. See this. Although Chen Daoxian was very envious, he knew that Taizhou and Cangzhou were in a different situation. This was the Jiang family's territory. True monarch Yuanqing, dignified true monarch Yuanying, were all forced by the Jiang family out of Taizhou. This shows that the Jiang family's style is domineering. The Chen family wanted to extend their tentacles to Taizhou, which was simply courting death. A vast island. Ginger family land. Inside a deep palace. 3 figures with similar faces sat high on the throne of the palace. In front of the 3 people, a shadow stood out of thin air. What do you guys think about your proposal? Black Shadow's tone was indifferent and nonchalant. You want our Jiang family to betray Qianyuan's sword sect? The Jiang family Yuanying sneered, don't forget, Izumo is now under the offensive of my Wanxinghai, you are not crazy, right? Ancestor Jiang, what are the facts, you know it well, why do you deceive yourself? He Ying said in a flat voice, Qianyuan Jianzong and my Shenqing Dao alliance have fought for more than 400 years, have you won the Izumo kingdom? Not to mention the local territory of my Shenqing Dao alliance. Besides, your Jiang family is now sitting on the crater that is about to erupt, so there is no sense of crisis at all? What do you mean by that? Ancestor Jiang felt a wave in his heart and immediately asked. What do you mean? Don't your Jiang family worry that after the real demon world channel expands again, it will become a new 2-world abyss, heard? Ancestor Jiang stood up abruptly from the throne. He stared intently at the shadow and said word by word, how did you hear about this news? This will not bother Ancestor Jiang anymore. He Ying smiled and said, I just want to know, how did the Jiang family choose? Do you choose to stand with Qianyuan Jianzong and let your Jiang family become cannon fodder against the invasion of the real demon world, or choose to stand on the side of my Shenqing Dao League and become the new Yuanying family of Izumo? Hear this. Jiang Lao's mood that has not changed for thousands of years jumped like a drum. He knew in his heart that his decision would determine the survival of the Jiang family. If you choose the wrong one, you will be doomed. He stared at the shadow, and the shadow stared at him. A long time. Ancestor Jiang said slowly, this matter is of great importance, and I have to think about it again. Yes, but your Jiang family is running out of time. Remember, once the real demon world channel expands, your Jiang family will be worthless. Say it. The shadow suddenly disappeared in front of the 3, as if it had never appeared before. Watch the shadow leave. Old Ancestor Jiang clenched his fist tightly. Eternal Night Immortal City. After a lot of shopping, Chen Daoxian finally stopped. This line. He spent nearly 50 million spirit stones in the various shops in the immortal city of Evernight, and this amount of spirit stones could buy 5 Zifu pills. Plus the blood crystals that were purchased for 20 million spirit stones before. On this trip to Taizhou, he spent a total of 70 million spirit stones. Before coming to Taizhou, he brought 340 million spirit stones from the Qin family, and after removing 70 million spirit stones, there were 270 million spirit stones left. Such a huge sum of spiritual stones, even for the great clan in Cangzhou, is a considerable sum. But to today's Qin family, it's really not that scary. The Chen family's magic weapon factory and medicine pill factory have formed a certain industrial scale, and the profits brought to the Chen family every year are in the hundreds of millions. Coupled with the similar traditional income of the Chen family and other cultivators. Today's Chen family, simply described as rich and powerful, is still not enough. Now the headache for the entire Chen family is not the issue of making money, but the issue of spending money. In other words, the Chen family has earned too many spiritual stones, and they don't know how to spend them. If it were replaced by another family, they would definitely choose to store these spiritual stones piled up into mountains and keep them in the family library. But Chen Daoxian is different. Chen Daoxian was unfamiliar with his life, and secondly, he was not sure whether there were stronger monks behind the two monks in Zifu. It is not the act of a wise man to act rashly. Chen Daoxian has been in the practice world for so long, and he knows that stability is the first rule of survival. The reason why Shen Juezhen was planted was that he was not stable enough. Although Shen Juezhen's life-saving ability is first-rate, his ability to cause trouble is unmatched in the entire Wangxinghai. Tidy up. Chen Daoxian flew out from the isolated island, and flew towards Cangzhou with the escape light. Half a month later, Chen Daoxian finally returned to Shuanghu Island safe and sound. Looking at the familiar Shuanghu Island, Chen Daoxian suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. Dantian gas is domestic. A white lotus of good fortune floats quietly, and on the lotus of white good fortune sits a villain exactly like Chen Daoxian. This villain is not Chen Daoxuan's nascent soul, but his flesh and blood clone. Similar to the avatar of the natal instrument, the flesh and blood avatar that is sacrificed with the deity can also be taken back into the sea of Dantian energy. This is also the meaning of the word for the robbery in the secret method of for the robbery. At a critical moment, this flesh and blood clone can really block the catastrophe for the deity. Chapter 236. Twin Lakes Island. In Chen Daoxuan's Lingfu courtyard, a white figure sat on the Wenyu futon, and beside the white figure, a figure wearing a black Taoist robe sat next to it. This black figure is the flesh and blood avatar of Chen Daoxian. Just as the deity opened his eyes, the black avatar opened his eyes at the same time. Chen Daoxian glanced at his avatar, and said with a satisfied look on his face, "I didn't expect that it would be so easy to upgrade the avatar to the foundation establishment stage." As he said that, he felt even more satisfied when the deity was promoted to the 4th floor of the foundation building. A mere 3 months. Not only did he restore the deity's sea of consciousness to a radius of 100 miles, but he also raised his cultivation base by 1 level and reached the 4th level of foundation building. Speaking of which, it was an unexpected surprise. Chen Daoxian has not practiced well for a few days since the corpse tide in Cangzhou was pacified. Been running around all the time. This time, taking advantage of the restoration of the sea of knowledge of the deity, advancing the cultivation base to the 1st floor is indeed a surprise. However, for today's Chen Daoxian, whether it is the 3rd floor of the foundation building or the 4th floor of the foundation building, it has little impact on his strength. Because he has already reached the limit state real yuan mentioned in the Chenyuan Sword Classic. Even if he raised his cultivation base to the 9th floor of the foundation building, the total amount of real energy in the Dantian Qi Sea would only increase, and the total amount of real energy had the support of the White Lotus fortune, and Chen Daoxian was not lacking at all. For the current Chen Daoxian, he wants to improve his strength. Only by raising the cultivation base to the Purple Palace period, or breaking through the space sword intent to the visible realm, or obtaining a stronger magic weapon. As for raising 1 or 2 levels of cultivation, to him, it doesn't make much sense. Of course, although it is of little significance for the improvement of strength, the promotion from the early stage of foundation establishment to the middle stage of foundation establishment proves that he is 1 step closer to the Zifu period, which is a good thing for any cultivator. In fact, what surprised Chen Daoxian even more than the improvement of his cultivation was the recovery of the sea of knowledge of the deity. It may be a little inaccurate to use the word recovery. To be precise, it should be the re-expansion of the sea of knowledge. More than 3 months ago, Chen Daoxian cut a part of the sea of knowledge when he sacrificed his flesh and blood in the immortal city of Yongla, causing the sea of knowledge of the deity to collapse to a radius of 60 kilometers. This damage is not too big. It stands to reason that unless Chen Daoxuan's cultivation base is raised to the Zifu stage in the future, it will never be possible to expand the sea of consciousness. But because he has the sea of divine light, a spiritual practice method. Under his practice day and night, the sea of consciousness finally recovered to a radius of 100 miles. However, after the sea of consciousness recovered, the speed at which he expanded the sea of divine light suddenly slowed down a bit. For this question, Chen Daoxian is also mentally prepared. If the expansion of the sea of knowledge is easy, wouldn't he be comparable to the divine consciousness of Jin Dan or even the Yuaning cultivator in the foundation building stage? Obviously, this is impossible. The original Shinjue real person plundered countless elixir to restore spiritual consciousness. When he was in the Jin Dan stage, his spiritual consciousness was slightly stronger than that of the Yuaning cultivator. Chen Daoxian cultivated at the foundation building stage, and his spiritual consciousness was comparable to that of a cultivator of Zifu, which was already a blessing. It is almost impossible to compare the spiritual consciousness of the foundation building cultivation with the golden alchemy cultivator. You must know that the spiritual consciousness of the Jin Dan cultivator is fully expanded, and it can reach a radius of thousands of miles. I don't know how many times larger than Chen Daoxuan's current sea of consciousness. Except for the change of the deity. What surprised Chen Daoxian even more was the change in his avatar. This avatar has just been successfully sacrificed, and it only has a chi refining stage, but its body refinement cultivation is much stronger, reaching the realm of flesh and blood. In order to enhance the strengths of the clone, Chen Daoxian did not hesitate to spend a lot of blood crystals, and wanted it to improve his body training to a higher level. Unexpectedly, after 3 months, although the cultivation of the clone has improved a lot, it still failed to break through the shackles of the deity and reach a higher cultivation. But the avatar's chi refining cultivation base has made unexpected progress, reaching the foundation building stage. In this way, the strength of my clone is almost comparable to the deity. He looked at the avatar wearing a black robe, and his expression became more and more satisfied. I just don't know how much worse this avatar is than myself. Having said that, Chen Daoxian shook his head. With the deepening of cultivation, Chen Daoxuan's judgment of the strength of the monk became more and more blurred. In fact, after Chen Daoxian comprehended the sword intent, he discovered that it is extremely unreliable to use the cultivation base to measure the strength of a cultivator. Even if there is no Kendo realm's bonus and influence on the cultivator's strength, it is still very unreliable to judge the strength of a cultivator by just relying on the cultivation base. Because in addition to the cultivation base and realm, the things that can affect the cultivator's strength include magic tools, explosive pills, magic talismans, all kinds of desperate secret methods, and so on. 2 monks, until the final separation of life and death, it is difficult to say who is stronger and who is weaker. This is also the reason why the Qianyuan Jianzong's list of Foundation Establishment and Hidden Dragons, Zifu Tianjiao list and Jindan Reality list are so credible. Because the monks recorded on the 3 lists are all achievements in the battlefield of Izumo. There are no fake ingredients. Otherwise, there are so many cultivators in Zifu, why are you stronger? Speaking of which, Chen Daoxian is likely to be on the latest issue of the Foundation Establishment Hidden Dragon list. Even with his record in the Zhangzhou Corpse Tide, it is possible to rush directly to the top 10 of the Foundation Establishment Hidden Dragon list. However, Chen Daoxian himself has no interest in the 3 lists launched by Qianyuan Jianzong. Chen Daoxian is not interested in this famous, good thing at all. He is more interested in tangible benefits than fame. Of course, it can't be said that there is no benefit to being famous. The Zhou family in Zhangzhou is now so famous, and it has a great relationship with Zhou Mubai, the arrogance of the Zifu Tianjiao list. Even because of Zhou Mubai, some senior officials of Qianyuan Sword Sect would look at the Zhou family highly. This is the intangible benefit of being on the list. Even the fact that the Chen family on Shuanghu Island has become a big family in Guang'an is also related to Chen Daoxuan's great reputation. Without his status as the second sword cultivator in Guang'an Mansion, how could the Chen family become the 3rd largest family after the Yang family? Think of this. Chen Daoxian glanced at the avatar, the black avatar nodded, turned into a streamer, flew into Chen Daoxuan's Dantian Qi Sea, and sat on the white lotus of good fortune in his Qi Sea. In the Sea of Qi, the white lotus of good fortune and the black avatar complement each other. Around the two, a little star is extremely dazzling, which is the Siyu sword intent that is about to enter the realm of star transformation. In addition, there are Feishua, Qingying double swords and a set of second-order high-grade life spirit armor. Alone circled. Except for the invisible space sword accident, This is the whole scene of Chen Daoxuan's Dantian Qi Si. Take back the avatar. Chen Daoxian stood up, turned into a flash of light, and flew in the direction of Chongping Magical Instrument Research Institute. Chongping Institute of Magical Instruments. When Chen Daoxian arrived here, he met an unexpected person in the empty laboratory of the research institute. Young Patriarch. Young Patriarch. Seeing Chen Daoxian, everyone bowed and saluted him. With a wave of his hand, Chen Daoxian looked at a young monk and said, "Fusheng, why are you here?" Young Patriarch, I. Before Chen Fusheng had time to explain, Chen Daochu, who was tinkering with him on a strange magic weapon, smiled and patted the magic weapon beside him, and said, "Young Patriarch, we are studying a magic weapon purchased from Qianyuan Jianzong's magic weapon hall. Here comes the baby." Oh, heard. Chen Daoxian looked curiously at the treasure that Chen Daochu said. This magical instrument looks extremely thick, and its main part is like a thick wall, and the surface is glowing with black light, and it feels indestructible at first glance. Although Chen Daoxian is a senior weapon refiner, with the naked eye, he can't tell what kind of material this magic weapon is made of. Talking about this weird magic weapon, Chen Daochu suddenly became excited. "Young Patriarch, listen to me, this magic weapon." Before he could explain, Chen Daoxian waved his hand and said, "We'll talk about this instrument later. Let me ask you, did the talisman lithography machine developed last time look good?" The last time Chen Daochu showed him, the magic weapon that automatically made the magic symbol with the spirit control formation as the core, indeed aroused Chen Daoxuan's interest, or attention. According to Chen Daochu, once the research on this magical instrument is successful, it will be announced that ordinary people can also complete the production of magic symbols independently. The significance of this is no less than the Rongling furnace invented by Chen Daoxian, or even better. Because the magic tool factory with the Rongling furnace as the core, in the final analysis, still has to rely on the power of the monks to refine the magic tools. And Chen Daochu made this talisman lithography machine, which only needs ordinary people to operate the whole process, and can produce magic talismans in a streamlined manner, and its significance is much greater than that of the Rongling furnace. Because compared with cultivators, the most numerous people in this world are still ordinary people. Although monks live longer, ordinary people are more fertile. The numbers of these two groups are at least tens or even hundreds of times different. Just like the Chen family on Shuanghu Island. Among all the clansmen, the ordinary clansmen now have a population of several 100,000, while the cultivators have only a few thousand. Most of these thousands of monks are just children educated in clanology, and there are less than 1,000 monks who can really invest in industrial production. This is also the reason why the Chen family's factory in Shuanghu Island has never been able to expand significantly. It is not the industrial instruments such as the Rongling furnace and the centrifugal wall breaker that restrict the industrial production capacity of the Chen family, but the cultivator population. But the talisman lithography machine is different. Once this thing is successfully developed, all ordinary people in the Chen family can join the production. By the time, the magic talisman factory will definitely replace the medicine pill factory and become the Chen family's biggest source of income. Hearing Chen Daoxian asking about the talisman lithography machine, Chen Daochu nodded his head like garlic, and said with a smile, "It has been developed a long time ago, but I see that you are in retreat, young patriarch, and have never dared to disturb you." Not only that, in the eastern part of the industrial zone, the newly built magic talisman factories have already been put into production. What? Hearing that he has been in retreat for 3 months, the Shuanghu Island industrial zone has undergone such a big change. Chen Daoxian was overjoyed and said, "Let's go and have a look together." Okay. Chen Daochu smiled and nodded. Immediately, Chen Daoxian, Chen Daochu, and Chen Fusheng flew towards the spirit talisman factory together. With Chen Daoxuan's elusive light, the two of them brought Chen Daochu almost in the blink of an eye. Descending the escape light and looking at the brand new magic talisman factory in front of him, Chen Daoxuan's heart pounded with excitement. Walk into. The three raised their legs and walked in towards the magic talisman factory. Once you enter the magic factory. Qin Daoxian found that as expected, the factory was filled with ordinary workers and not a single monk. Including the management personnel who manage each production line, they are all ordinary people. This magic talisman factory covers an area of about 1,000 square meters, which is far less than the 3 magic weapon factories and 2 medicine pill factories in the industrial area. C. Qin Daoxian looked at Qin Daochu and asked, "Why is this factory so small?" "Because the magic talisman lithography machine has just been developed, we still need to conduct further tests in production regarding its specific performance. This magic talisman factory is actually just an experimental factory." Qin Daochu paused. "There is another reason, because the production process of the magic talisman factory is different from that of the magician and the medicine pill factory, and the training of ordinary workers also takes a while." Heard. Qin Daoxian nodded clearly. Over the years, Qin Daochu has not only become more proficient in industrial terms, but more importantly, his industrial thinking has become more and more mature. Qin Daoxian knows that people are essentially animals of interest. After feeling the tangible benefits brought by industrialization, the Qin family members are more proactive than anyone else in promoting the industrialization of various industries. Nowadays, the production of magical instruments and the production of medicinal pills are basically in a state of semi-manual and semi-machine production, and only the production of magic talismans will be produced by machines. Therefore, not only Qin Daoxian, the young patriarch, but also the senior cultivators of the Qin family were all staring at the factory. "Young patriarch, look." Qin Daochu pointed to a new magic weapon in the factory that was 7 or 8 similar to the one Qin Daoxian had seen at the beginning. The talisman lithography machine is mainly composed of 4 parts, namely the energy system, the control system, the drive system and the workbench. This machine is powered by aura, and the energy is provided by the aura network in the industrial area. The core of its control system is the combination of the spiritual control array and the other 6 arrays. We have already solved these things last time. The main problem we solved this time was the drive system. Qin Daochu pointed at the diamond-shaped transparent gem-shaped object above the workbench, and said, "This is the laser head of the talisman lithography machine. It is one of the components of the talisman lithography machine, but it is also a magic weapon. It has a light attribute array inside it, which can be used to engrave spell patterns with spell lasers under the control of the energy system and the spirit control system." Qin Daochu continued, "This is the workbench. There are 4 buckles on the workbench, up and down, left and right. You can fix the bare jade of Lingyu on the workbench, and then press this button. The magic symbol lithography machine can work automatically." While fixing Lingyu, Qin Daochu pressed the red button on the back of the machine. Immediately after, under the power of the spiritual energy, the magic tool called the talisman lithography machine started to run slowly. Soon, the laser head shot out a dazzling beam, and under the drive of the machine control system and drive system, the spell pattern was slowly carved on the Lingyu. Qin Daoxian stared blankly at the scene in front of him, and suddenly felt a sense of trance as he traveled back to the society of his previous life. Chapter 237. Less than half a stick of incense. The magic talisman made of a Lingyu is completed. As the laser head slowly lifted, Qin Daochu took off the made amulet from the workbench, handed it to Qin Daoxian, and said, "Young patriarch, look." Qin Daoxian took the talisman solemnly and checked it carefully. This talisman is the size of a palm and about half an inch thick. The aura on it is restrained, and at first glance it is a first-order high-grade talisman of high quality. Qin Daochu on the side explained, "Currently, the talisman lithography machine in the talisman factory can only make magic talismans containing wind blade technique, but as long as we verify the stability of the talisman lithography machine, we can also make magic talismans containing other spells in the future. At that time, our Qin family will truly realize the automatic production of magic symbols. Not only our Qin family cultivators will be able to use extremely low-cost magic symbols, but also greatly enhance the strength of the family cultivators. It can also open up a new source of wealth for the family by selling magic talismans." Speaking of this, Chen Daochu's tone gradually became excited. Have to say, the magic talisman, like the magic weapon, can even improve the strength of the ordinary monk more than the magic weapon. Because ordinary cultivators use magic weapons at higher levels, they have to consider the issue of insufficiency of true qi or true essence. After all, not everyone is a sword cultivator, and the quality of true essence far exceeds that of cultivators of the same rank. For ordinary monks in the qi refining stage or the monks in the foundation building stage, using the same level high-grade amulet or a higher-grade amulet can greatly enhance the monk's strength. There are even many monks who regard high-level magic symbols as their trump cards. For example, a cultivator in the late stage of qi refining, if he masters a second-order spiritual talisman, he can explode a blow comparable to that of a cultivator in the foundation building stage in an instant. In the face of this kind of attack, unless the enemy has a life-saving secret technique or treasure, it is inevitable to die. It can be seen from this. How much a high-level magic talisman can improve a monk's combat power. Even if a cultivator in the qi refining stage does not have a second-order magic talisman, he has a pile of first-rank high-grade magic talismans, which can also crush cultivators of the same rank. Just imagine, someone is still manipulating a magic weapon or preparing to release a spell to attack you, but you pull out a bunch of magic talismans and smash it on someone else's face. The picture is simply unbearable to look at. Besides, the charm factory can also bring great profits to the Qin family. At present, there are only 5 large-scale factories in the Qinjia Shuanghu Island industrial zone. Including this small magic talisman factory, there are barely 6 factories. Among these 6 factories, the only ones that can really create profits for the Qin family are 3 factories of magic weapons and 2 factories of medicinal herbs. Only. Now these 5 factories are already saturated, and it is difficult for the Qin family to rapidly expand the magic weapon factory and the medicine pill factory in the short term. Because although the magic weapon factory and the medicine pill factory have solved some of the production steps of the magic weapon and the medicine pill, in the final analysis, they still have to rely on the power of the monks for production. It is difficult for the Qin family to have enough monks from their own family to replenish the factory in a short period of time. In the past, the Qin family had to send young monks to the factory in order to make a quick profit, but now the profits of the Qin family are getting higher and higher every year, and there is no need to squeeze the young Qin family monks. Therefore, the educational plan proposed by Chen Daoxian has been implemented again. According to this education plan, it takes at least 12 years for the Qin family's cultivators to graduate from school. Such a long education time must have greatly delayed the time for the Qin family cultivator to participate in production. In the short term, it does affect the interests of the Qin family. But considering the long-term interests of a family, this approach is inevitable. Every time Chen Daoxian used his spiritual sense to probe the 5 factories in the industrial zone, he could see the numb expressions on the faces of the monks who had entered the factory early to work. In a sense, the first batch of monks who entered the factory with the blessing character were basically hopeless. Even if their spiritual aptitude is acceptable, in this high-intensity, highly repetitive work, their thinking and understanding have long since become rigid. Make no further progress in their path. If nothing else, this group of monks of the blessing generation spend their whole lives, and it is not bad to be able to build a foundation under the accumulation of resources. As for reaching a higher cultivation level, there is no hope. Therefore, Chen Daoxian will never let the later cultivators of the Qin family continue to sacrifice for the family like this batch of cultivators. In other words, the sacrifice of this batch of monks of the blessing generation is to make the later family monks stop making such sacrifices. Even if he had to sacrifice, Chen Daoxian would choose to sacrifice the loose cultivators in Guanhai Xianqing. This is also the reason why he told Chen Daolian to turn Guanhai Xianqing into an industrial ferry city. He wants to build an industrial ferry city. In addition to the huge benefits, there is also the factor that Chen Daoxian does not want to see the family monks continue to be exploited. Inside the talisman factory, Chen Daochu said these words excitedly. However, he saw different expressions on the faces of Chen Fusheng and Chen Daoxian. Like him, Chen Fusheng had an excited look on his face, while Chen Daoxian frowned and fell into contemplation. Seeing the two of them looking at him, Chen Daoxian patted Chen Daochu's shoulder heavily and praised, "Good job." "Hey hey." Hearing this compliment, Chen Daochu grinned. Looking at the busy factory, Chen Daoxian turned his head and said, let's go back first." Chen Daochu nodded. "Say it." The three of them left the factory together and returned to the Institute of Magical Instruments with the escape light. Back to the original laboratory. Chen Daoxian couldn't help but ask, what is the cost and production capacity of the Lingfu factory now? Young Patriarch, Chen Daochu bowed his hands. This talisman factory can only be regarded as a small factory. As you can see, there are only 20 machines in total. According to the speed at which a machine can produce 8 magic amulets per hour, a maximum of 96 magic symbols can be produced in 12 hours a day. Wait, are you saying that this magic talisman factory doesn't stop all day long? Yeah, why stop? Chen Daochu looked at Chen Daoxian with a strange expression. The magic weapon factory is different from the magic weapon factory and the medicine pill factory. The magic weapon factory and the medicine pill factory are limited by the number of monks in the family and have to stop. After all, monks are human beings and cannot sleep without sleep. Work. But the machines in the magic talisman factory can do it. I arranged 3 shifts of ordinary workers, and each worker only needed to work 4 hours to keep the factory running around the clock. Speaking, Chen Daochu's face was full of pride. Hear this. Chen Daoxian didn't know what to say. He waved his hand and said, "It's okay, you continue." Chen Daochu nodded. Most of the Lingyu we are currently buying comes from Jinan Prefecture, and the price is much lower than the original 50 lingshire in Guang'an Prefecture. For only 40 lingshire, you can buy a piece of high-quality first-order top-grade Lingyu. The price of a spirit talisman made of first-order high-grade spirit jade is about 8100 spirit stones. For example, our Wind Blade magic talisman can only be sold for 80 spirit stones. Like some defensive spirit charms, the price is higher, about 100 spirit stones. However, as more and more spirit stones flowed into our Guang'an Prefecture from Jinan Mansion, the price of spirit talismans continued to decrease. Compared with the past, the average price of spirit stones was reduced by about 10 spirit stones. To sum up, the profit of each magic symbol produced by our magic symbol factory is about 30 spirit stones. Hear Chen Daochu's narration. Chen Daoxian finally had a preliminary estimate of the profitability of this small magic talisman factory. The labor cost of mortals is not considered. A small factory with 20 talisman lithography machines can produce up to 1,920 talismans per day, with a daily profit of 57,600 spiritual stones and an annual profit of more than 21 million. In this way, it is almost comparable to the Chen family's magic tool factory. Chen Fusheng on the side was dumbfounded after hearing these words. How big is this magic factory? Compared with the other 5 factories of the Chen family, it is a small workshop, and there is not even a single monk in the factory, but its profitability is comparable to that of a large magic weapon factory. As for the mass production of magic amulets by the Chen family, will the price of magic amulets be reduced? In theory, it will definitely have an impact, but you must know that the world of immortal cultivation is extremely wide, and the market for magic symbols is also the same. Moreover, the magic talisman is not the same as the magic weapon. It is a consumable that is not easy to store, and due to the constant disputes in the world of immortal cultivation, the market demand for the magic talisman is huge. With the Chen family's production capacity, let alone saturating the market in the Shou Xianjia, it may not be possible to saturate the Cangzhou market. Seeing Chen Fusheng swallowing unconsciously, Chen Daoxian said with a smile, "It seems that this magic talisman factory will replace the medicine factory and the magic weapon factory and become the biggest source of income for my Chen family." Cough cough. Hearing Chen Daoxuan's affirmation, Chen Daochu became humble instead. "Young patriarch, the test of our Lingfu factory is not over yet. Maybe there are other defects in the Lingfu lithography machine." "Yes, you have learned to be humble now." Chen Daoxian laughed out loud. After laughing for a while, Chen Daoxian put away his smile and said sternly, "In short, the matter of the Lingfu factory will be entrusted to your Magic Weapon Research Institute. In the future, you will allocate a special research force to continue to conquer the Lingfu lithography machine." Technical problem. For example, the types of talisman lithography machines, higher-grade talisman lithography machines, and so on. Also, don't forget what you promised me to automate the production of the Magic Weapon Factory and the Medicine Pill Factory. With that said, Chen Daoxian gave him a deep look. "Hear this." Chen Daoqi's happy face immediately crossed, and said, "Young Patriarch, the success of the talisman lithography machine is mainly due to the puppet technique of the Qianji Temple. If we do our own research, we don't know how much time it will take, but the Magic Weapon Factory and the Medicine Pill Factory can be automated." Chen Daoqiu shook his head and stopped talking. Chen Daoxian also knew that this was completely clueless. The shape of the magic tool factory is good. It is not difficult to solve this problem, but it is really difficult to invent a machine to solve the problem of fusion of the embryonic device. The same goes for the medicine pill factory. The more advanced the pills are, the more complicated the final pill fusion is. Even when refining some high-level medicinal pills, cultivators are still required to practice special pill combination tactics, which are extremely complicated. It is conceivable how difficult it is to achieve automated production of these two things. Looking at Chen Daoqi's appearance, Chen Daoxian also knew that this requirement was a bit embarrassing for the time being, and he smiled. "Don't be under pressure, I just give you a research direction. As for whether it can be done, who can know? The Qianji Temple can create a magical array such as the Spirit Control Array. Maybe in the future, Chen Daoqiu can also create a revolutionary magic tool that will be popular in future generations." Hearing these words of encouragement, Chen Daoqiu nodded. When he first founded the Institute of Magical Instruments, he still obeyed Chen Daoxian's orders, but with the birth of new instruments one after another, Chen Daoqiu completely fell in love with the development of new instruments. Chen Daoqiu found that whenever he developed a new magic weapon, he had an indescribable sense of gain and satisfaction. This feeling, even higher than his cultivation base, made him excited and excited. Finish talking business. Chen Daoxian turned his head to look at the strange magic weapon in the laboratory like a dark wall, and asked, "You were just looking at this?" "Right. Talking about this new type of magic weapon developed by Chenyuan Jianzong's Magic Weapon Hall." Chen Daoqi's face was suddenly full of excitement. Chen Daoxian was very impressed with the Hall of Magical Instruments of Chenyuan Jianzong. When he was most impressed by Chenyuan Jianzong's Magical Instrument Hall, he saw the magic weapon that Zhang Yu held in his hand to exchange for military exploits, the Arc Shadow Plate. When Chen Daoxian saw the Arc Shadow Disc for the first time, he was really shocked by it. It is hard for him to imagine that there is still such a genius in this world, who can rely on a magic tool to ensure the healthy operation of the Chenyuan Sword Sect's war merit system. Afterwards, Chen Daoxian saw the Hall Master Huyen of the Hall of Magical Instruments in Chenyuan Jianzong again, and was sheltered by the other party, so he was naturally more impressed with the Hall of Magical Instruments. Chen Daoqiu, who was standing aside, continued, "Strictly speaking, this instrument is neither an offensive instrument, nor a defensive instrument, or even an auxiliary instrument." "Oh?" Hearing that it was a special magic weapon again, Chen Daoxian became interested. He looked at the thick tortoise shell curiously. At first, he thought it was a new type of defensive magic weapon, but Chen Daoqiu told him that it was not. Seeing Chen Daoxian's curious expression, Chen Daoqiu smiled and said, "Accurately speaking, this is a special magic weapon to quantify the strength of a monk." "Quantify the strength of a monk?" Chen Daoxian frowned. "Right." Chen Daoqiu nodded and his face became serious. "Actually, I also discovered this problem after foundation building. I think I am a dignified foundation building cultivator." In private discussions, he is not a match for Fusheng. Speaking of this, Chen Daoqi's face became slightly embarrassed. On the other hand, Chen Fusheng's expression was stagnant, and he said a little shyly, "Uncle Daoqiu, you don't need to comfort me. Anyway, according to the responsibilities of the young patriarch, I will rarely have the opportunity to charge for the family in the future. Chen Daochu smiled bitterly and said, since then, I have been wondering, is it really accurate to measure a monk's strength simply by his cultivation? Hear this. Chen Daochuan's face also became serious. This is not only Chen Daochu's doubts, but also his doubts. It stands to reason that Chen Daochuan's own strength has long surpassed the cognition of the monks in the Foundation establishment period, and even most of the monks in the Zifu are not his opponents. Simply using his cultivation to measure his strength is no longer unreliable. And in the world of immortality, there are many monks like Chen Daoxian. The problems that Chen Daoxian and the others can find, naturally, a behemoth like Chenyuan Jianzong will not be able to find it. As a result, the Hall of Magical Instruments of Chenyuan Jianzong produced such a special instrument that can quantify the strength of a monk. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.